All right, guys. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today we're going to be having a debate between Brother Leafy and Muhammad from God. So, in today's debate, it's titled Sunnism or Quranism. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam teach? And it's going to be between our two guests here. So, if you do want to get questions in at the very end, you put your super chats from now, inshallah, and we'll try to get to you. We're going to do one question each for each side. How the structure is going to be is we're going to have 15-minute intros. They're going to have their respective presentations each. Then we're going to have 10-minute rebuttals, 15-minute cross exams. We're going to try to make sure that the person who's being cross examined has enough time to respond, but at the same time, the person who's questioning gets obviously the yes or no replies that he wants. 5-minute closings, and then we're going to have Q&A for about 20 minutes, inshallah. So let's try to keep this respectful, guys, in the chat. No blasphemy, no personal attacks on anyone. If we do get any super chats at the end where it's not relevant or it is personal attacks or ad homs, then yeah, I will be sure to ignore you. So yeah, without further ado, Leafy, you can take it away with your intro, inshallah.
Yeah, barakallah feek. Right, you guys can see?
I'm just gonna give you a three. Yeah, we can see. So I'm just gonna give you 3, 2, 1, and then on 1 you just begin.
Yeah,
Okay.
just give me a warning at 3 minutes and at 1 minute if that's okay.
Yeah, I got you. Okay,
Right.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, all right. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. First of all, I'd like to thank Brother Dean for hosting the debate and my interlocutor for agreeing to debate me. The topic of this debate is Sunnism versus Quranism. What did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, teach? So, the way we understand with any historical figure, what did they believe, what were their norms at that time, is we go to the earliest witnesses. So, for the Prophet, peace be upon him, we go to his known works, which is the Quran, obviously, which contains his sayings and speech. So even the most skeptical scholars like Patricia Crone, they accept that the Quran contains utterances from the Prophet, and that will be the primary source for what we can know what the Prophet believed and thought, right? The second best source is the early interpretations of the Quran, so the earliest sources that we know to interpret these verses. How did they understand it? What was the context that they understood the Quran? Thirdly, we'll go to the understanding of the companions, so his wives, his companions, his friends, his successors. How did they understand and interpret these verses? And finally, we look at the corroborating non-Muslim contemporary accounts to see what they can tell us about the early Muslims and what they believed. All right. So firstly, we go to the Quran. So the Quran says very clearly that يُحِلُّ لَكُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْكُمْ الْخَبَائِثِ. So the Prophet will make lawful for you things that are good and prohibit for you things that are evil. In this verse, we find that the legislative authority is bestowed upon the Prophet and he acts as society's lawgiver. This is according to Sheikh Mustafa Al-Azami. Right? There are other verses that also indicate the same thing. For example, the Quran refers to the Prophet as a good role model, uswatun hasana, and it says to obey Allah and to obey the Messenger. It also says in another verse, أطيعوا الله أطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم, and those in authority among you, and if you differ among anything, return it to Allah and His Messenger. These are some of the many Quranic verses which state the authority of the Prophet and emphasize the fact that his whole life decisions, judgments, and commandments have binding authority and ought to be followed in all spheres of life by Muslim individuals and communities by Muslim states. Right. So these are the verses that very clearly indicate that. Right. I want you guys to be aware that whenever I bring you a verse, I'm also going to bring you a scholarly interpretation of that verse to support my understanding. So the next thing is the understanding of the word sunnah. What does sunnah mean exactly? So the sunnah is known as the normative practice of the Prophet, according to Wael Halaq, who himself is a non-Muslim scholar of Islamic studies, a very well-respected one at that. And he quotes the verses that I just quoted to you before. He says, accordingly, it would be difficult to argue that the most influential person in the nascent Muslim community was not regarded as a source of normative practice. In fact, the Quran itself explicitly and repeatedly enjoins Muslims to obey the Prophet and emulate his actions. He who obeys the Messenger obeys God. Whatsoever the Messenger ordains for you, you should accept, and what he forbids, you should abstain from. And dozens of similar verses tell Muslims to do the same thing, essentially. Again, it may be argued, like my interlocutor wants to argue, that obedience was only incumbent while he was alive, but now that he's dead, we don't have to follow him anymore. But what Halaq says to this, it's a view that doesn't really make sense. It's hard to accept. Firstly, Muhammad, like all the other leading figures who preceded him in Islamic Arabia, represented a source of normative behavior for his contemporaries and successors. The association of certain individuals with the ideal sunnah constituted an integral part of the social value structure of Arabia, with or without Islam. And secondly, to obey him by definition was to obey God, establishing a modus operandi as an exemplary and worthy person of being emulated by his contemporaries and by later generations. Right? He goes on to say that from the foregoing, one concludes that the sunnah of some kind was associated with the Prophet, that the word sunnah was from the beginning associated with the Prophet. They went hand in hand together. It wasn't a later invention, as some scholars would like to argue. Whether this is the same sunnah attributed to him 1 or 2 centuries later is one that we will now attempt to answer. So he's saying, look, it's obvious that the Prophet and the Sunnah went hand in hand from the beginning, but whether this is the same Sunnah that we have now with us preserved in the Sunni Hadith corpus is a question that now we're going to answer. He says, there is little doubt that the core of the Sunniyak material was inspired by the vitally important issues raised in the Quran and represents a portrait of the actual Sunnah enacted by the Prophet. It would be inconceivable that all these issues were confined to the Quran and excluded from the Sunnah. So he's calling my interlocutor's position inconceivable. Such matters pertaining to inheritance, taxes, property, and which were dealt with by a range and variety more or less equal to the range and variety in which these matters were recorded in the Quran, are examples of authentic Sunnah. Their inauthenticity, in fact, cannot be established. So these are beyond question Sunnah that are authentic to the Prophet, that he undoubtedly said and legislated, that we have preserved in the Sunni extant canon. Another scholar, M.M. Braveman, he says that the Sunnah of the Prophet, or the prophetic Sunnah, is a very early and genuine Islamic idea that cannot be considered as based on later doctrinal considerations. So again, reiterating the same point, that the Sunnah is something that went hand in hand with the Prophet from the very beginning. Right. Likewise, Nicholas Sinai, another very well respected prophet, commenting on the verses that I just explained to you about obeying the Prophet, he says, while the Quran does not explain whether and how to be obedient to and emulate the Prophet, the messenger continues to be the messenger continues to be obligatory after his future demise, which is envisioned in the Quran in chapter 3, verse 144. The foregoing passages do anticipate a notion of normative practice of Muhammad, which of course was an important factor in the post-Quranic emergence of the Hadith canon. So what he's saying here is that the Quran presupposes a notion of normative practice of the Prophet that is to be followed by subsequent generations, right? Now, okay, you've shown to us, Leafy, that the Sunnah was there from the beginning and that parts of the Sunnah are definitely authentic. But how do I believe that hadiths as a whole are historically reliable or a source of history? Well, Western scholars themselves accept the historicity of hadith. The best among them is Dean of Hadith, Dr. Harold Motsky. He says, while studying the Musannaf of Abdur Razzaq, I came to the conclusion that the theory championed by Goldzinger, Schacht, and in their footsteps, many othered which included in general and rejects hadith literature as historically reliable, deprives the history of Islam of an important and useful type of source. So he himself considers hadith to be historically reliable. Now, what about the earliest Muslim communities? What did they believe about hadith? Well, it's very clear and self-evident that Abu Bakr himself narrated hadith, and this is recorded in early Christian sources. So they tell us that these early Monophysite sources, that when Abu Bakr addressed his generals to enter Syria, he said, when you enter the land, kill neither old man nor child, and establish a covenant with every city and people who deceive you, right? And this is found in the hadith corpus right here. This is Abu Bakr speaking, and he says the same thing verbatim. Do not kill women, do not kill children, do not kill infants, and he gives the prohibitions of these acts of war. And this is ultimately going back to the Prophet. And these are all hadiths that are prophetic hadiths that have the same content of what you should do in terms of war. What are the guidelines, right? So ultimately, Abu Bakr is narrating hadith and implementing it and considering it a source of authoritative legislation. This is very clear and well known. We have other non-Muslim sources. For example, John Bar Pinkay. He's a Eastern Syrian monk and chronicler, and he says about the early Muslims that they kept to the tradition of Muhammad to such an extent that they inflicted the death penalty on anyone who was seen to be brazen against his laws. So again, the term tradition here doesn't necessarily mean like Bukhari, like they had Bukhari with them. No, but the oral tradition that was there and authoritative for the normative practice of the Prophet is what they kept in line with. And this is a non-Muslim source that is witnessing the same event. Likewise, in the early Maghazi literature, here Sean Anthony notes that when Abu Bakr later assumed leadership of the Muslim community after the death of God's messenger, he dispatched 3 commanders to Syria, and he appointed them after different authors. Likewise, at-Tabari, he notes the same incidents, and he says, in that Abu Bakr is recorded to have said that whatever the apostle did is what I will do, and I will not be an innovator, a mubtada. I will die upon his sunnah. Right? And this is authentically narrated in at-Tabari and accepted by Western scholars. Likewise, the early Muslims obeyed a prophetic instruction, not verbatim in the Mus'haf, and implemented it as law. In fact, so much so that when Umar said, why don't you change Osama? Osama was someone that the Prophet put in charge of the army to go and attack the Syrians and the Persians, to go and conquer Syria. He said, will you ask me to do what the apostle did not do? That's how firm Abu Bakr was upon the Sunnah. So very clearly, without this, the Muslims would not have been able to conquer Rome and Persia. Without the Sunnah, without the implementation of the Prophet's wisdom, they would not have been able to conquer Rome and Persia and all these other places. So these are the formalized versions of these arguments: the earliest Muslim practice and the external corroboration. Now, what about al-Mu'mineen Aisha? al-Mu'mineen Aisha herself is said to have narrated 2,200 hadiths. Well, this is surprising on the hadith rejector paradigm, because we would expect her to be a hadith rejector. She's mentioned in the Quran, praised, her chastity is defended in the Quran, and yet she's relating hadith. And those hadiths can be historically attributed to her. So, for example, the famous one that I brought to the interlocutor the other time we spoke, I showed him that this hadith is authentic, that scholars consider it to be authentic, and that she is the source and common link for the report. Right? So Motsky considers this hadith to be authentic. Likewise, Kara also considers this hadith to be authentic about the hadith about breastfeeding being abrogated. So she is narrating a hadith and considers it to be authoritative and legally binding, right? Otherwise, why is she narrating this hadith? Why is everyone attributing these things to her? And he asked me, he made a challenge. He said, can you show me any sahih hadith that says that the 5 breastfeedings was abrogated? Well, here it is in front of you. This is the hadith I was speaking about, right? So this is the formalized version of those reports that I would like him to address in his rebuttal. This is Aisha used prophetic rulings to practice law, and that not only she used it, also the people who narrated that hadith likewise would have considered that report to be authentic and legally binding. Otherwise, they wouldn't be narrating it. Right. So likewise, we have Umar. Umar himself also narrated hadith, and this is narrated in Nadia Abbott's work, Studies in Arabic Papyri. The thing that's narrated here is the death of Umar radiallahu an at the hands of Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. Right, and this is found here. The translation is all there. But what it is actually found in Bukhari. Now, this manuscript is before Bukhari was even born. So when people say Bukhari made it up, this manuscript is before Bukhari was even born, and yet Bukhari narrates the same gist of the event, exactly the same. The attacker's identity, the stabbing, what he was reciting when he was being killed and he was about to die, the ordering of the 6-man council, and the names of the 6 men. All of this is found before Bukhari even existed in manuscript evidence. So for those who want to say Bukhari fabricated, well, obviously this is not the case. Now, we also know that hadiths were written down at the time of the Prophet. This is Goldzinger. He says, it can be assumed that the writing down of hadith was a very ancient method of preserving it, and the reluctance to preserve it in written form is merely the result of later considerations. Right. Likewise, that's a revisionist scholar. Now, from the sanguine scholars, we have Sheikh Muhammad Zubair as-Sidqi. He also agrees with him. He says that many a companion of the Prophet is likely to have carried his sahifa with him and used it to dispense instruction and edification to his circle. Right. So even non-Muslim scholars and Muslim scholars agree that hadith was written down at the time of the companions, and that they would have their own sahifas to write down hadiths. Right. Likewise, I can quote to you 108. These are just some of the Muhajirin and Ansar who are said to have written hadiths. Right. From them, we have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Aisha, Abdullah bin Mas'ud. From the Ansar, we have Anas bin Malik, Ubay bin Ka'b, Zayd bin Thabit, and 108 more that I mentioned in Al-Azami's book. All of these people narrate hadith, and the Quran tells us to follow the Muhajirin and the Ansar. So why aren't the Muhajirin and Ansar hadith rejectors? My opponent will need to answer for that in his time. Likewise, Nadia Abbott, she says in her book, the following conclusions are therefore forced upon us. Zuhri and his contemporaries received from their predecessors a genuine core of sayings of the deeds and actions of Muhammad, along with a genuine core of sayings of the successors and companions. Thereafter, deliberate tampering with either the content of the isnads or the Prophet's tradition as distinct from deeds of the companions may have passed by undetected ordinary transmitters, but not by the aggregate, ever watchful, basically honest, and aggressively outspoken master traditionalists and hadith critics. So she's agreeing that they narrated a core of authentic material. Likewise, in this book, in this article that what's called surveys different views on hadith, Nadia Abba agrees that the tradition of writing hadiths in Islam existed during the reign of during the Prophet's
3
time.
minutes.
Yeah, Barakallah Fiqh, existed during the reign of the Prophet's time, but the second Caliph Umar ordered the destruction of all hadiths in order to preserve the unity of the Quran. This was his ijtihad. But that doesn't make Umar a hadith rejecter, like my interlocutor would have you assume. Rather, he's a defender of the Sunnah, and he did that to preserve the Quran so it doesn't get confused. Anyway, likewise, Harold Motsky says again, the idea that hadiths are fake and forged and they have no historical significance is totally wrong. Many fragments from the 1st century Hijrah have been found, forcing scholars to reconsider some wrong views of hadith. Okay, so what are these 1st century fragments that these people are talking about? Well, one of them is the Sahifa of Hammam ibn Munabbih, and he's the hadith that is given, right? حدثنا عبد الرزاق عن معمار عن همام بن منبه هذا ما حدثنا أبو هريرة عن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And there are 138 hadith, but I just chose one that I found to be ironic. This is hadith number 21 from the Sahifa, and it's found in the extant hadith corpus. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أطاعني فقد أطاع الله. Whoever obeys me, he has obeyed Allah. ومن يعصني فقد عصى الله. And whoever disobeys me, he has disobeyed Allah. To the end of the hadith. So again, this is a hadith that is found, that is authentically attributed to the Prophet according to Muslims and non-Muslims. So why doesn't my interlocutor accept it? Who'll have to explain and answer, right? Likewise, scholars say on this that when comparing these reports to the extant hadith corpus, they showed that they were exactly the same. So, as might be expected, the texts in Hammam, those recorded in Ibn Hanbal, Bukhari, and Muslim, with the same isnad, show almost complete identity except for a few omissions and interpolations which do not affect the sense of the reports. Right? And he goes on to say that the impression left by the study of the variant readings based on the Sahifa of Hammam ibn Munabbih of 2.5 centuries long enterprise is that these people were successfully remembering the material in a disciplined but imaginative way. Right now, on the reliability of the seerah, I'll quote from James Howard Johnson, who's a professor of Islamic studies at the University of Oxford and well respected in his field. He said in his book that the seerah is corroborated by non-Muslim sources. He says, surprising as it may seem, there is corroboration for 3 principal episodes of the seerah. First one is the attack on Najran in 523 by the Axiom intervention. Ya barakallah fiqh. Abraha's expedition in 552 and the Persian takeover of Yemen in 571, and you can read them here. He says the basic skeleton of history is itself stands up remarkably well under critical scrutiny, right? And he says the Muslim narrative of origins can then be used in conjunction with a wide range of non-Muslim sources of proven value to show the historicity of the material. Finally, Robert Hoyland, he says that the non-Muslim sources corroborate and agree with the Muslim sources, and they're all here for anyone who wants to look at them. Echoing David Power's view, this is about the prophetic hadith. He says here that the burden of proof lies with the skeptical scholars. Robert Sargent, he says that we cannot start from the premise that a tradition is genuine, report of fact. So we have to start from the premise that a tradition is genuine. And until you can show me that a tradition is false, then I'll have a reason to doubt it. But we don't start from the position. Yeah, no worries. You can give me like a 1 minute thing to finish it off because I have like 1 slide left. We cannot start from the premise that a tradition is genuine, matter of report of fact, until it is invalidated by palpable bias. And this is the position of Western scholars. And on the authenticity of prophetic hadith, David Power says that he believes the onus lies on those who would deny the authenticity of reports attributed to the Prophet, and not on those who just begin from an a priori doubt of the Muslim sources. So these are the conclusions that I want my opponent to wrestle with. The Quran orders us to obey the legislative commands of the Prophet and to follow his normative practice after his death. The earliest companions and successors believed in the hadith as an authoritative source of legislation outside of the Quran. Non-Muslim contemporary accounts also relate the same material and support the tradition. And finally, historians accept the seerah as generally reliable, and historians accept prophetic reports as generally authentic. The burden of proof lies on him to show me why prophetic hadith are inauthentic. With that, my time is over. Barakallah feek.
Okay, barakallah feek. So we're going to give Muhammad an extra minute as well. Just give me a second to do that. And Muhammad, just let me get you up. Here we go. And I will start the time. Yeah, you just muted, Akhi. So Muhammad, you're muted.
The other thing muted. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So 1 second. Let me present. Can you add it to the stage? Cool. Okay. So, but you don't need to make me as small. Make me bigger, please, if it's possible. Can we do half and half or a different layout?
Yeah, I can do it like the way. So what I can do is I can do it like this, and then just have you on the right or on the left. Sorry. So do you want it like this?
Sure. Yeah, in your position.
Yeah. Okay. So just once I get you on the panel, I'm gonna start the time within 3 seconds. Okay. So let me get you up.
Cool.
Let me swap us. That should fix it. And then do that. There we go. Okay. So on the count of 1, when I say 1, then the time will start. Okay. So you got 16 minutes. And 3, 2, 1.
All praise to God, the one who sent the blessed Prophet Muhammad and brought down with him a guiding light, a clear book wherein God guides whom he wills from the darknesses into the light and into the straight path, or Sirat al-Mustaqim. We can clearly see this in the verse that is presented to us, that God is saying that he sent a clear book and that he guides with it to the straight path. So God is the one who's informing us about the straight path. And this is what the Prophet is teaching us and guiding us to, is said straight path. And he tells us how to achieve this straight path. This is at the end of chapter 6 of verse 151. He says, come, I will tell you what is forbidden, right? Do not associate anything with God. Be good to your parents. Do not unalive your children. Do not unalive unjustly. Approach the money with do not approach the money of an orphan unjustly. Fulfill the measures. Speak justly. And then God concludes very clearly by saying that this is the straight path of Prophet Muhammad, and do not follow any ways. And this is Prophet Muhammad saying this. This is my straight path. So again, this is referring back to what God is forbidding clearly in the Quran, in the clear book that guides to this straight path. The Quran is clearly teaching us that God is the judge and all matters fall back to him. And who's better than God as a judge? And it says this, and who's better than God in judgment for people who are certain. Yet my opponent wants to tell me that there are judgments that are outside of the book of God and attributing said judgments that go against the Quran back to God. The book is explained in details. This is again in 6:114. God is saying that everything has been detailed out for you in the book. So my opponent wants to make the case that the book is not detailed, and we need to find these details in books and other narrations that are outside of the Quran. And again, God is clearly telling us in the same verse, should I seek other than God as a judge? And my interlocutor, my opponent here is trying to tell me that yes, Prophet Muhammad also has the ability to judge, ability to legislate, and it's outside of the book of God. So this is not something the Prophet would obviously teach, because it goes against these clear verses. And we can go as far as God listing many messengers or prophets, and concludes the chapter 12 by stating that there is certainly a lesson in those stories for people of intelligence. This is what the Prophet was teaching us, that we have to reflect on these messengers and prophets and in regards to what they want to teach us. Yet we constantly find in Sunnism, and we will define what Sunnism is shortly, focusing on one prophet and his companions. And that we find in the Friday sermons that topics revolve around the Imam talking about what the Prophet said outside of the book of God, and what the companions did, again, outside of the book of God. However, when we look at their own sources, even in Sahih Bukhari, it shows that Umar bin Khattab, a huge proponent of saying that the Quran is sufficient, states that the Umar bin Khattab recited Surah An-Nahl on a Friday on the pulpit. So his khutbah was reciting the Quran and getting closer to God by allowing the book of God to express itself, instead of trying to put a man between you and God. Now, the Quran itself is telling us that it's clearly detailed, and upon the Prophet is the clear notification. So we can clearly see that because the Quran has already defined itself as complete, fully detailed, that nothing has been omitted away from it, and my opponent is claiming that the Quran does not have all the details, and it was the Prophet to give these details to a fully detailed and a clear book, even though God tells us in the Quran that the role of the messenger is not to but deliver a message. And you can see it here, and only the clear notification is upon the messenger. The Quran also emphasizes to us that the previous groups, the Jews and the Christians, that the books is the sole authority and criterion of Furqan. So God, when he talks about the old people, he keeps telling them, that they will find the judgments of God in the Torah, while the Prophet didn't even have to judge between those individuals, because they already had the judgments from God. And then God is also telling us about these individuals, the people who follow the Torah, and the Ahlul Injil, as God clearly states, that people who do not follow what God has revealed, and here specifically about the Torah, that those are the disbelievers. So going outside of the book of God, and the Prophet teaching you to go outside of the book of God, is what God is saying, that you are following what God has not revealed. I understand my opponent can make the case that God has revealed this, but then we have to scrutinize what these individuals are saying that the Prophet said. And then we go also, God repeats it, that God has, whoever does not judge by what God has revealed, then those are the transgressors. And God states here specifically the people of the gospel. It's not the people of the gospels and the sunnah of Jesus. It's clearly what the gospel is preaching, that those are immoral. And then God goes as far as saying that we have brought down the book to you in truth. So judge between them with what God has revealed to you, which is again the book. And there's many verses in the Quran that states this. There's also God stating to you clearly that after he said the people that don't follow the Quran, that they are immoral, disbelievers, they are unjust, fasiqun. And then he clearly tells us that these are the verses of God that he's reciting to us in truth. In what hadiths, in what narrations, in what explanations, in what explanations outside of the Quran that these people need to follow, what traditions that they need to assign themselves to, and then sit and put it to one man. When God clearly states in the Quran that there are sunan alladhina khalu min qablikum, and that's what God is guiding us to in the book. This is in chapter 3, that God wants to guide you to the traditions of the Muslims. And as people who have read the Quran, they clearly state that we were Muslims before it. So the concept of Islam, which is what the Prophet is teaching us, it was a living concept that had its own traditions, that God is telling us these traditions in the Quran. It is not traditions of how the Prophet himself applied to his society. We can clearly see that there was an evolution in what these individuals want to say as tradition. But when God is talking about the word tradition, he talks about the certain way that these believers had these certain morals and certain rules that they had to do. The way that they apply them, it depends on the society that you're in. They also say that they make the claim, right? Even though God is saying that the verses are sufficient here, that they make the claim that God's messenger's role is to clarify from outside of the Quran. Yeah, God states that the Quran is the clarification for all things. The Quran is a clarification for all things. And it's very clear here that when the people are presenting to you hadith, narrations, and things, and examples and parables outside of the Quran, God answers this. And he says, and they do not come to you with an instance, but we have brought you the truth and best in explanation. And there's many verses that are showing to you that the Quran is the elucidation and the explanation and the clarifications to all matters. But these individuals are trying to diminish what the Quran is saying, and they're saying that the Prophet is teaching you things that are outside of the Quran. If we grant that the messenger had outside revelation that was recorded to explain the Quran and it was mandatory, we find many crazy and outlandish verses, the exegesis to these verses. So they say that this Quran is being explained by the Prophet, and these individuals were tasked many years after the fact to record it. So we have, for example, the verse Al-Najmi Idha Hawa, the star when it falls. We see here Tabari recording that this verse was about an individual that he denied God. So this verse was talking about the Prophet saying, "Are you not afraid that the dog of Allah will eat you?" So these are the explanations and clarifications that are giving us. Yet we find that the man was eaten by a lion, which is not a dog, and obviously the star when it falls, when they're saying that the Quran is revealed. Again, the star in the Quran is not two words, but you could see that there's so much confusion and so much things that you have to say. You have to look outside of the explanation for you to get understanding. So they say that these books, this what they call the Sunnah and the Hadith books, are explaining the Quran. Yet we need someone to explain the Quran, and it still doesn't make sense for anybody who's coming with a clear way of judging. It is very clear from the Quran that the Prophet Muhammad was guiding his followers to the Quran as the source of divine instruction. He would remind with the Quran and not anything else, as it states in the last chapter of verse 50. We are aware of what they say. You are not a dictator over them. So there's no dictatorship. There is no him assigning things that are outside of the book of God. As God states, why do you forbid what God has made legal? So obviously he has to judge by what God is saying. And it states here, so remind by the Quran, whoever fears my threat. So we constantly see God referring to the gospel, referring to the Torah, referring to the books that he sent. And now the Prophet is being ordered to remind with the Quran. It doesn't say remind Quran and my tradition. It doesn't say Quran and my Ahlul Bayt, Quran and the scholars. It clearly states here that the Quran is the criterion and there's nothing else after that. Now, historically, by which many people have recorded and experts have uncovered, we see a lot of discrepancies of what people teach and what people preach nowadays in Islam, going against not only the teachings of the Quran, but what history is showing. For example, one of the cornerstones of Sunnism is often repeated the Shahada or Shahadatain, where it says, I witness that there are no deities except God and Muhammad is the messenger of God. La ilaha illallah wa Muhammadan Rasulullah. Yet these inscriptions started to appear in the late 7th century on coins and monumental architects as the Dome of the Rock, which highly suggests that these Shahadatain was actually a later innovation. And this is mentioned by Fred Donner and Lindsay. And there's a lot of evidence to show such things, where we see on tombstones where individuals are putting La ilaha illallah, which later became La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. And we see the same thing that is being presented to us in the coins and what people were finding. Now, we also have people that are in the early onset of what individuals were saying after the Prophet Muhammad, the believers, they would use the Shahada La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, and that was the one that was oftenly coined. But again, later innovations that were pushed into the religions, that's when they started to force this Shahadatain concept. Now, we also have the individual telling me about Abu Bakr, which is true that Abu Bakr allegedly has only narrated 142, but Abu Bakr is the closest friend to Prophet Muhammad, and out of the thousands and the thousands, and he only narrated 142, which they do not have legislative power. They are aligning with the Quran, saying, therefore, whatever the Prophet was teaching, he was teaching the Quran. The thing that we find with Sunnism is that they have a lot of concepts that is not found in the Quran, and they have a hadith that says that whoever imposes a condition that is not found in the book of Allah, that condition is rejected, it's falsehood. So they have things like stoning an adulterer if she's married, which this is not found in the book of God. My opponent presented Aisha, which is a concept that where she says that this is abrogated. It's still in the book when he passed away, and this is Sahih Muslim. He wants to take me to other narrations to disprove his own hadith, and this is usually what they do, but it clearly states in the Sahih that it was being recited while the Prophet was passed away, which we don't see. Now, Abu Bakr he also did not champion the propagation and the transmission of hadith. He was focusing on the Quran, and this was later emphasized by the second Khalifa Umar, who ruled from 633 to 644. This is the second most important Khalifa according to Sunnism, after the blessed Prophet Muhammad, who made a societal legislation as a awli al-amr, and you have to obey the people of authority. He said that he banned the narrations of hadith. He banned the writing of hadith. Historical sources show that he was the first to champion that decision, and it carried out not through only Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and also in the Umayyad periods all the way to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz of the period, and Ma'mun, and who ruled from 717 to 720. So we have 80 years of the early onsets of people banning the narrations of hadith, banning the propagation and the writing. I wanted to have the traditions of the Prophet written down, but I fear the book of God might be encroached upon, hence I shall not permit this. So he knew that it was not something that is important. As he himself says, the book of God is sufficient for us. The traditions is something that is nice to have, but it's not mandatory, because you are clearly able to distinguish the traditions and pick up the traditions in the Quran. Now, we also see that Omar is saying, he goes on as further saying, he therefore changed his mind and instructed the Muslims throughout the provinces, whoever has a document bearing a prophetic tradition, he shall destroy it. So he did not want to propagate it, and he wanted to champion that the Quran is sufficient. In this day and age, we can clearly demonstrate the preciseness and the proof of God's miracles of preservation of the Quran through what is known as the QCT, the Quran Consonantal Text, a preservation that is not proven for any hadith corpus. The preservation is witnessed but cannot be explained, as it's clearly a miracle of God. The QCT and the codification of the Quran we have today is often attributed to the third Khalifa, Uthman, who was close as a companion to the Prophet, and he was learning from the Prophet. He championed the propagation and codification of the Quran, but did not focus on preserving or propagating the so-called mandatory secondary revelation, which they assume is the Sunnah. In the early onset of Islam, the community, especially after the blessed Prophet Muhammad, especially judges and people of authority, they adhered to the Quran with a concept known as ar-ra'i, which the Sunnis usually like to downplay these individuals, or human opinion, where the Quran would have been used as the primary inspiration, and it was for the individual to understand using reason on the best way the verses to be applied. So there's an evolution with the verses. There's ijtihad and the societal changes with the pressures that are coming from what the society requires. They are forced to go back to the Quran and understand the verses a little differently to be applied. There was also another major group known as the Mu'tazilites. They pushed for the use of rationality, and they were again in power. And this is during the onset of the Islamic Golden Age, when the Mu'tazilites were very affluent, were very popular, and we have a very well-known and respected scholars such as Al-Jahiz that's downplaying hadith, and he goes as far as saying that the people who followed Abu Huraira would be the Nabita, the contemptibles. So he really looked down on hadith because it goes against the rationality, it goes against what people are saying, and they just want to go and try to find a few verses where they find some things that are aligning with the Quran, and they forget the rest of the corpus, which is the majority of it was lies. Omar also went as far as threatening Abu Huraira, this prominent hadith narrator, that if he did not stop narrating hadith, that he would stop him. Later emergence of written hadith collections, crucially the formal compilation of hadith literature, which later became the backbone of Sunnism. The actual compilation, it was a later thing, occurred long after the Prophet and the early companions. Historians point out that no comprehensive hadith collection was written up until in the 7th century. The earliest known works, aside from Ibn Ishaq's biography, is Imam Malik's Muwatta, which appeared in the mid-8th century, about 150 years after Muhammad. And in Muwatta Malik, we see narrations that it states that the people around that there's a narration that the paternal uncle heard from his uncle, which would be the Sahabi at that point, that he's not recognizing anything that what he found the people doing except the call of prayer. So the religion has already been modified by the time Muwatta Malik came. Reports also indicates that Umayyad rulers, in fact, sorry, I did miss a point here.
30 seconds.
So, 30, I thought you were going to give me a 3-minute, but anyways, we also have I want to add a simple set of questions to my opponents. Was there gatherings where people would sit and review hadith like they did with the Quran? Was there public sit downs or recitations of hadith? Is the hadith from Muhammad or is it from God? So is it from God? Why would you attribute it to Muhammad? And we also want to see where the concept of Jama'ah, because Sunnism is Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It is the people of the tradition and the people of the consensus. I want to see where you can show me the consensus is backed by the Quran, and we would like to see how the consensus is always going to be the defining factor of what's right and wrong. So if the Prophet was alive today, would his Sunnah be the same, or was it going to be different? And with that, I would like to pass it back.
Okay, I appreciate it, Muhammad. So Leafy let me know that he wanted 3 minutes. So you didn't tell me you wanted 30 seconds. I just gave you it. So you want me to notify you at
If you
3
want-
minutes? And
No, was it 16
You want-
minutes or?
yeah, that was 16. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect. perfect.
So when do you want me? So when do you want me to notify you in future at 3
Yes.
minutes and 1 minute?
Yes, so that
Muhammad,
if-
is
Yeah,
there
no problem.
anything? Is there anything you said that you didn't manage to get out? I'll let you speak. I don't mind.
I was just going to push the point. The only thing that I did, I was going to push the point that the codification of hadith came much later, which is something that we
Okay,
can
I got that done
explore
already.
later.
So that's fine.
Yes, perfect. That's it.
Okay, beautiful. So, guys, just
let
a
me just-
reminder. So, for Q&A, we need super chats in so we can read them out for each side. Make sure we get from both sides. I don't want just a bunch of questions for Muhammad and not for Leafy, and vice versa. So make sure that we get from both sides. Okay. So you can start sending the super chats in from now. And now we're going to enter into the rebuttals. So starting with Leafy. Leafy, do you need me to put anything up? Yeah.
Yeah, just share my screen. Barakallah feek.
Okay, beautiful. No problem. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes for rebuttals. Just 1 second.
Yeah. So I'll just start off with the. Is it starting or not yet?
Yeah, so 3, 2, 1. I'll let you start.
All right. Barakallah feek. Yeah.
3,
So the
2, 1.
Yeah, so the book is fully detailed. So I mean, my opponent basically just gave me his own exegesis of the Quran. He didn't, bring any scholarly sources. He brought a few here and there, but he misrepresented a lot of them. And we'll go through each misrepresentation one by one. So first of all, he said the Quran is fully detailed. Now, this is a verse that Quranists love to bring to try and distort it. Literally before the verse starts, it brings you the haruf al-muqatta'a, alif lam mim. So if you're telling me the Quran is fully detailed, but yet at the beginning it gives you alif lam mim, you're gonna have to tell me, what does alif lam mim mean? You're gonna give me the full detail of alif lam mim. Obviously the verse doesn't mean literally fully detailed. It means that it has everything needed for your guidance, and that's what we Sunnis accept, and that's the correct understanding of that verse. Secondly, he said Umar was a hadith rejecter. Now this is something that's like patently false. No one accepts this. This is like such anachronistic thinking in scholarship. Sheikh Mustafa al-Azami talking about people who disliked hadith. So this is common objections. Companions dislike writing hadith. He says, summing up the argument regarding the reasons for disliking recording of hadith, there is no evidence that the interdiction of writing was based on the order of the Prophet. It was based at one time or another on personal prejudice. Nevertheless, the same scholars committed a hadith to writing. The recent research has proved that almost all the hadith of the Prophet was written down in the life of the companions, which stretched to the end of the 1st century. He goes on to say, summing up the argument, Al-Khattab describes reasons for disliking recording. He gives several reasons, but there is no evidence that the interdiction of writing was based on any prophetic order. Many scholars who disliked writing at one time or another, purely based on personal prejudices, nevertheless committed hadith to writing. So this is not something that Umar got from Allah, or he got straight from the Prophet. No, it was his own ijtihad, that he didn't want hadith to be confused with prophetic, with the Quran. So until there was this clear distinction between them, then the later writing took place. So again, Umar is not a hadith rejecter. This is anachronistic thinking. Finally, he quoted some weak hadiths or some absurd tafsir. Let me grant you your understanding of that tafsir. How does that in any way challenge the Sunni hadith corpus? That the fact that there's authentic Sunni material in the hadith, how does that challenge that? Let's say there's one tafsir that you think is inauthentic. By the way, we can explain it away. But let me grant you your understanding that the tafsir is nonsense. So what? How does that disprove the rest of the entire corpus? You haven't shown me anything here. You spoke about Fred Donner. Fred Donner's a joke. I made a video refuting him on my channel. You said that the Shahadatain was a later invention. No, this is not true. The issue is that the companions, when they first took control of Persia and Rome, they didn't straight away implement it with Islamic symbols because it wasn't practical. So they kept the same shirki symbols because it would have taken too much time and energy to get rid of them all completely. What they did was they just put some small Muslim inscriptions on the side and they kept it going. It's only later, after Abdul Malik bin Marwan took complete control in the 690s and 680s, that we start getting things like the Dome of the Rock inscription. Joshua Little has an article on this, and he says that the epigraphic and inscription evidence is equivocal. So again, you got nothing there. You said the stoning verse is recited after, which somehow disproves. I don't know what that's supposed to do. So the point here with the stoning verse that I brought you, the hadith of Aisha, which you conceded last time is historically attributed to her. I don't know if you want to backtrack that, but the point is that she's saying that there's a hadith that is legislative outside of the Quran that she herself is narrating, other companions and other wives are narrating, and she considers it to be authoritative. So the hadith is showing you that there's a verse, there's a ruling outside of the Quran that the earliest Muslims considered to be authoritative and correct. That's the whole point of the hadith being quoted. You talked about the QCT, but that QCT is itself in the Muslim tradition. So let me go down here to Kara. You guys can see the screen. He talks about the study done by Sadri and the carbon dating that's done in the QCT and whatever. He says, more importantly, based on the textual evidence, the dating of the compiled codex of the Quran can be traced to Umar's date of death, which is 644, with certainty. However, because Umar could not interfere with the Quranic codex, how does he know this? Because of the hadith of Umar, where he said that I would have put this verse in the Quran myself, but I feared that the people would say that Umar is distorting the Quran, so I didn't do that. But it is possible to date it even earlier to Abu Bakr because of this hadith. He says this date corresponds with the traditional Muslim accounts of the textual history of the Quran. So even the textual history of the Quran, according to secular scholars, they all attribute it to Uthman, and even some scholars like Kara go even further and attribute it to the Prophet, like Kara and Motsky, right? Then finally, you talked about the late compilation of hadith, and this is not true. Again, I showed you. You said the earliest compilation of hadith is Muwatta Imam Malik. This is false. I already gave you Sahifat Hammam ibn Munabbih. This is in the year 70. Let me go back up so you guys can see. This Sahifat Hammam ibn Munabbih in the year 70. Here, it's right here. In particular, in 1985, Mustafa al-Azmi announced that he found 12 authentic hadith texts of the 2nd century Hijrah. He edited a small number of them and published them under the name of Sahifas, right? Fragments of the early manuscripts of Abu Hurairah's student, Hammam ibn Munabbih, have found in the libraries of Bahrain, Beirut, and Damascus. These new findings prove that the hadiths were written even in the time of the Prophet. This is because narrations written down by our companions are called Sahifas. Thus, the discovery of the manuscripts of Suhail bin Abi Salih and Hammam ibn Munabbih shows us that the science of hadith developed continuously since the time of the Prophet. Who's saying this? Non-Muslim scholars. These are not Muslim scholars. And I showed you that there is a corroboration between the hadith of that's found in the Sahifa, the one that I showed you, hadith number 21, and the and Sprite also shows that the transmitters were not being deceitful or anything. They were literally just narrating exactly how it came down to them. Is there anything else you had? Yeah, you said, was there public sit-downs at the time of the companions? Yes, there was. There was public sit-downs of hadith, and people would narrate to their students. Even at the time of Ibn Hanbal and Bukhari, they would test each other with hadiths, mix up the matan and the chains, and make sure everyone knows exactly what they're talking about and who heard from who. So yes, that answers your question. How much time do I have, Brother Dean? Hello?
Sorry, Akhi, yeah, 4 minutes 15.
Still got 4 minutes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything. There's nothing else that I wanted to go through or that he brought up. Yeah, so I mean, I'll just go through some other common objections because I thought he would bring better objections. I'm not gonna lie. So common objections are like Bukhari has 600,000 hadiths, but he only took 7,000. So how is it he only took 1%? Whatever. This is what Nadia Abbott says on the issue of back projection. She says analysis of the content of the chains of transmission of the traditions and of the documents and the available parallels in the standard collection, supplemented by the results of an extensive study of sources of the tradition of ulum al-hadith, lead me to the conclusion that the oral and written transmission went hand in hand almost from the start. So what hadiths were written down at the time of the Prophet. The traditions of Muhammad as transmitted by his companions and successors were as a rule scrupulously scrutinized at each step of the transmission, and that the so-called phenomenal growth of hadith of the tradition in the 2nd and 3rd centuries of Islam was not primarily a growth of content so far as the hadith of Muhammad, but represents largely the progressive increase of parallel and multiple chains of transmission. And I'll show you what that means shortly. So she says, using geometric progression, we find that 1,000 to 2,000 companions and senior successors transmitting 2 to 5 traditions each would bring us well in the range of the total traditions credited to the exhaustive collections of the 3rd century.
3 minutes.
Yeah, no worries. Barakallah fiqh. Once it is realized that the Isnad did initiate that chain reaction, these fanciful numbers of 600,000 don't seem so fanciful after all, right? And then they plateau eventually. So I'll show you what she's talking about. So essentially, this is one hadith, right? When anyone amongst you observes prayer after Jum'ah, he should observe 4 rakats. Simple hadith by Abu Hurairah, right? And this is the chain of narration for that hadith. This is one matan, one gist, but yet it's narrated multiple. So this is the backgrowth. When he says 600,000, he's talking about individual chains, narrating the same distinctive gist. But if you just count the one distinctive gist, it becomes an order of magnitude smaller. right? Like 10 times smaller. So instead of 600,000, now it's like 60,000, 50,000, something like that. And 7,000 from 50,000 or 60,000 is not easy. I mean, it's not impossible. It's not crazy. It becomes much more reasonable. This is one shubha that they bring. Finally, on the authenticity of sources, he hasn't, hopefully he addresses it in his rebuttal. He says, the following conclusions are therefore forced upon us. Zuhri and his contemporaries received from their predecessors a genuine core of the sayings and deeds of Muhammad, together with a genuine core of sayings of the deeds of the companions and successors, along with some accretions that, because of human mistakes. Obviously, it's going to happen with oral tradition. Thereafter, deliberate tampering, either with the content or the snads of the Prophet's tradition, as distinct from the sayings and deeds of the companions and successors, may have passed undetected by ordinary transmitters, but not by the aggregate, ever watchful and basically honest, aggressively outspoken master traditionalists. So she's telling you that there's a content, there's an authentic core of traditions that is being narrated by Az-Zuhri. So why don't you take them? Why don't you take them? That's the question. If you do, you'd become a Sunni. And finally, on the chain of transmission again, because some people talk about authenticity, Bernard Lewis, he's an Orientalist. He says, traditional science, as it was called, differed in many respects from modern historical source criticism, right? And they often disagreed with the evaluations of traditional scientists about the authenticity of reports and narratives. But their careful scrutiny of the chains of transmission and their meticulous collection and preservation of the variants in the transmitted narrative give to medieval Arabic historiography a professionalism and sophistication without precedent in antiquity and without parallel in the contemporary medieval West. By comparison, the historiography of Latin Christendom seems poor and meager, and even the more advanced and complex historiography of Greek Christendom still falls short of the historical literature of Islam in variety and analytical depth. This is Bernard Lewis. He's an Orientalist. He hates Islam, right? He's Islamophobe, and he himself is admitting that the hadith has no precedent in antiquity because of the chain of transmission. So, ikhwa, I just want you guys to understand, who should you follow? Should you follow Muhammad from God and his understanding of some Quranic passages, or should you follow the Quran, the Sunnah, the Ijma', the non-Muslim witnesses,
30 seconds.
and no worries. I'm going to end it here. Should you follow Muhammad from God and his, with all due respect, goofy gymnastics of understanding the Quran, like his understanding of the Quran, or should you follow the understanding of the companions, the predecessors, the mothers of the believers that the Quran itself prays? The choice is yours. I think any sane, rational mind would choose to follow the companions, the wives of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and the early generations of Muslims.
Okay.
Barakallahu feek.
Barakallahu feek. So let's get Muhammad up. So do you need to present anything, Muhammad, or is it just going to be...
No, it's a rebuttal.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
So I'll just give you 3, 2, 1 in a second.
Okay, my brothers and sisters, are you going to believe Prophet Muhammad when he's saying that Jesus did not die on a cross and God has raised him and that Jesus is the Messiah? Or you're going to go by our traditions and all these proofs that we have where people were saying that Jesus is the Son of God and that all these traditions that we have inherited from the people before us, and this is why you have to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. These are the same argumentations that we get from Christians that this brother is presenting, that he's just picking and cherry picking the things that are aligning to what he's saying because the people that followed before their forefathers did the exact same things. There are many verses in the Quran criticizing these types of practices, that what they're saying, the majority of them do not believe in God except they are mushriks. They just do not understand that their practices and what they were doing has been heavily modified. They talk about traditions that are existing outside of the Quran, but he only wants to talk about things that are actually aligning with the Quran. He brought up the narration about Aisha, but yet he has yet to present to me where it shows in the Quran there's 5 suckles. I never said that this is actually attributed to Aisha. I said there's reports that are attributed to Aisha because individuals like me, like Leafy, and people before us, we're talking about the Quran. And we're talking about what they've witnessed from the Quran, as God clearly states in chapter 5, what they have memorized of the book of God, and they were witnesses to it. So we are able to actually clarify from what God has clarified from us in the Quran, and that's what individuals did. When we're criticizing Sunnism is these judgments that are coming outside of the Quran, the stoning, the suckles, walking, eating, talking in a certain way, which is not found in the book of God. Now, my opponent did not answer a very simple question. If the Prophet was alive today, would he have the same sunnah? Any rational mind with any objective would understand that this society has changed. There was evolution. And so, therefore, if the Prophet was alive today, he would not have lived, nor would he dictate the same way that he dictated, because simply times have changed in wars, in society, in taxes, in property laws, in inheritance, things of that nature, even in in marriage, the way that people get married today is a little different than what they did in the times of the blessed prophet. We have now concepts of the dowry being paid differently because there was an evolution in religion. And that's why God did not preserve the sunnah. And he's telling me about all these historical sources on how people saying, yes, there's a tradition, but there's a lot of issues with this tradition where we keep needing these filters to come around every few years and to sit and verify hadith, without which the latest one apparently was in the 70s or 60s, Al-Albani telling you what's sahih and what da'if. He's saying that the Quran is the primary source, yet he did not show me in the Quran where God is actually showing us the anticipation of these hadith books, these other dictations that are outside of the Quran. The only thing that he did was quote a disbeliever saying that there's an anticipation of traditions, yet, and he gave me a verse which was in chapter 3 that had nothing. Muhammad is just a messenger and the people before him passed. I would like him to bring up that verse and show me how it supports his conclusion. He tells me he only brought 3 verses from the Quran about chapter 7 where Prophet Muhammad is allowing and disallowing, which is clearly shown by the book of God, that's how he's removing the burdens. You see this in chapter called Muhammad, and those that follow the light, he's taking away the burdens from them. So you could take the verses in isolation, just like how you did. Whatever the messenger has given you, take it, and whatever the messenger did not give you, then stop from it or refrain from it. But this is about the rewards of in a battle and the faith. So, but they want to take a sliver and then they make a whole exegesis and they playing gymnastics. Even with their own scholars are telling them wrong, because Tabari does not agree with that exegesis that he gave us. He told me that Prophet Muhammad is a role model. This is something that's expressed in the Quran. But the same thing was exact same wording was used for Abraham. So God states, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ أُسْوَةً حَسَنَةً فِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ. So how do we see this excellent pattern, this excellent example that we have of Abraham, other than what Quran is telling us about Abraham, the way that he's thinking, the way that he's applying? So God states, for example, the prophet was not hard-hearted. He was soft-hearted and kind to the believers. This is a tradition that we can inherit from the Quran. So it's not the denial of that there are traditions that people who are Muslims tend to take on it. One of the traditions is praying. One of the traditions is giving from what you've given. These are traditions that existed prior to the blessed Prophet Muhammad, that Muhammad is teaching us, that is telling us from the Quran. They're talking about applications and they're saying that their application is the superior method, but we see how their countries are in shambles, and the way that they approach material is just they quote all this history, but they never quote the book of God, as God states in the Quran that they have taken this book forsaken. That's what the messenger said, and that's what we're witnessing. Now he's telling me about the definition of the sunnah. The sunnah is defined in the Quran different with what we're doing. God is not going to sit and tell you to follow the sunnah of one individual because you're going to fall into idolatry, and that's what we presently see from them. You're not defining to me what obey means. God says obey God and obey the messenger and ulil amr. Now you're saying that the messenger has legislations that are outside of the Quran that are pertaining to religion, that yet you do not show me where the legislations of ulil amr also would have to fall under that same category, because it's under the same obeying. So when we start to scrutinize the verses that you present, you scrutinize your position and your exegesis of what the verses are presenting, we see your position falls apart because the Quran is denying your verses, and yet you have yet to present proper evidence where the Quran is pointing you to a source outside of the Quran. Now, other thing is he's telling me about the taxes and the inheritance. I've already answered that there was an evolution. We could clearly see that with Umar bin Khattab, for example, when it came down to the policing and how taxing is going to work. And then they started to attribute that to zakat and taking a certain portion. This is also historically been preserved with what not preserved, written down by different corroborating witnesses. But at the same time in history, especially in hadith sciences, for every report, there's like a report that negates one, and then there's all these contradictions. But we do not find this with the Quran and the history of the Quran. They like to use a fallacy because of how amazing the Quran was preserved. They want to attribute that this preservation is because of the hand of man, and therefore they preserve the other things. But we have, for example, one of the reciters, the readers of the Quran, Shu'bah Ibn Hajjaj is saying, I fear that nothing will lead me to hell more than hadith. And he says, I never heard Jabir ibn Zayd say, the Prophet said, Qala Nabi, right? Yet the young men around here are saying it 20 times an hour. And this is what we constantly see from Ahlul Hadith, where it's Qala Rasul, Qala Rasul, Qala Rasul, Qala Rasul, Qala Rasul. But when we look at the Quran, it states that Qala Rasul is in the Quran, Qul, 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 Qul. And when we see the questions that are being asked to the Prophet in their Hadith narrations, like when is the last hour, God is giving you the answer, Qul. that the knowledge is with God. But we don't see that in the hadith. We don't see the direct instructions of God. We see them tampering so that the people would have these doubts, so that they would start to idolize and they would start saying lies and they would fall from it. This is the subversion of religion that we found in Christianity. This is the subversion of religion that we found in Judaism. And this is the subversion that we found in Sunnism. The
3
hadith
minutes.
about, so he's telling me about the hadith about war. These are things that we are capable of actually understanding from the Quran. You cannot transgress. You cannot kill the innocent. You cannot fight people who are not fighting you. These are concepts that are found in the Quran. But now show me how that means that I have to stone adulterers because it's not found in the Quran. Just because there is some truth to hadith, you're saying to accept the whole hadith. But I can push back and saying to you, I can find lies in hadith and false narrations, so therefore I would reject the rest of it. So the exact same extremist positions that you want to present, I can also take that same position. I understand that there are some truth that aligns to what the Quran is saying, and that is acceptable. Certain things in tafsir is acceptable because it's what the Quran states. Some narrations, I wouldn't say that the Prophet said it, but it would align with the Quranic mentality. That's acceptable. But what we have, the problem is this over-reliance on legislation that is outside of the book of God, and it's causing division, it's causing hate. You're saying that the Prophet was promoting and teaching that there was going to be 73 sects, where the Quran states that anyone who, he's saying from my community there will be 73 sects, yet the Quran clearly states that whoever became a sect, you are nothing to do with them. So why would the Prophet say my community when the people who are sectorized, such as yourself, they're not from his community? Now, we understand that the tradition is an application. I want him to simply answer, would the Prophet have the same sunnah as today? Would the Prophet do and live and eat and act in the exact same manner, or would it have been evolved to the time? And this is the push of what the Quran alone community is. This is what we see Omar has. Omar, if he had like the some of the wisdom that was bestowed on the Prophet of understanding and applying the Quran, and he learned from that, he went and evolved with that, and you could see that. So when the concept of Taraweeh, he clearly said that let's put one imam and let him run the prayer, right? And then he came back and he said this is a good innovation. So this concept of subjective understanding of the Quran by the leader, not some individuals that keep making mistakes, people that are becoming influential because of their understanding, because of their worldviews, we clearly see they're evolving with the time with the Quran. But your hadith, which is your love the isnad, is to catch the liar or to catch the Shi'i, because the concept of isnad did not become prominent except in the way that you guys perceive it until the time of the Mutawakkil, when they needed to find the Sunni and the Shi'i because of sectarianism and politics. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see my opponents adhering to all these scholars and these texts and
30 seconds.
stuff. But he is not showing you Quranic evidences that proves his position. He has yet to tell me where the Jama'ah and the concept of the Jama'ah comes as one of the things about Sunnism. He's defining Sunnah, and then he's attributing Sunnah as Sunnism. Sunnism is much different than what the Sunnah is talked about in the Quran. We do not deny the concept of Sunnah, Sunnat Allah, Sunan alladhina khalu min qablikum. What we deny is the legislative power of Sunnah. Like if you wear red is haram, if you wear gold is haram. All of this stuff is nonsensical and it cannot be proven by the book of God.
Dean, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. So, yeah, guys, we've got super chats in from Muhammad. I think all of them are from Muhammad, to be honest. Let me read this last one.
Of course it is.
Yes, yeah. So they're all from Muhammad. So if you don't mind, guys, so
Wait, Muhammad, wait,
yes.
Dean. What you can do is you can get, because I think Muhammad, you're streaming as well, so I'm sure your audience will have questions for me. So if you can pick questions, that's fine as well.
Sure, and I can just pick them up, guys, if you want to. But is it question and answer time?
Yes, yeah. So just guide them towards. So Muhammad's audience, you're streaming. Guide them towards my channel. Super chats are going to be prioritized, and if there's no super chats at the end, then it's just going to have to be random from Muhammad's audience. Okay. So
Okay.
if you do want to be prioritized from if you want your question prioritized directed against Leafy and you're on Muhammad's position, then be sure to send super chats. Otherwise, it's going to be at random. Yeah. So we're going to do the best. Yeah. So the most influential part within the debate, the cross exams.
Sorry. I just want the people on my channel no insulting questions, because you guys are saying things. It's not. Well, let's keep it on the subject matter.
Yeah. So anything that, like I said at the beginning, that's derogatory, off topic, we're gonna ignore. Okay, from both sides. So now we're gonna have cross-exam. So like I said at the beginning, guys, it's gonna be 15 minutes. Okay. So the cross-exam is 15 minutes. We're gonna start with Leafy cross-examining Muhammad. So let me just get this up. So you got 15 minutes, and like I said at the beginning, try to answer directly. And if you have any leading up questions, that's fine, but don't ask too many leading up questions. Otherwise, the person will feel like he has no time to actually give a satisfactory answer. Okay.
Yeah,
So
15 minutes.
yeah, 15 minutes, and we're gonna start at 3, 2, 1. Okay. So 3. Muhammad's not there.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead. People can hear me.
I'll just
Okay.
wait for you to come and sit down, Habib.
Sorry.
No problem. Are you good? Take your time.
Cool. Let's go.
Okay. So we'll start at 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Start the time.
All right. So who knows more about the Prophet and his teachings, you or al-Mu'mineen Aisha,
It would be the mother of the believers.
the mother of the believers? Correct. So why does she narrate 2,200 hadiths if she didn't think hadiths were authoritative?
How many hadith?
2,200.
You can't prove that.
Yes, I can.
Then go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's in our tradition.
That doesn't mean that it's true. That's a circular reasoning. You're saying that 2,200 because people said so.
No worries. No worries. Aisha narrated one hadith, and she considered that one hadith to be authoritative and legislative. That's all I need to disprove your position. Why is Aisha narrating hadiths? Even if you say 99% of them are fabrications, which I obviously don't agree with, but for sake of argument, no problem. That 1% that she narrated that she considered to be authoritative and legislative, why is she narrating that if the only thing you need is the Quran?
If it's something that's been recorded a little later, can't somebody piggyback off her name?
No. So are you telling me that the 2,200 hadiths, all of them are back projections?
No, some of them could be.
I'm saying are all of them back projections?
Some of them could be, and because there's the
I'm not asking about some of them. I granted to you some of them could be. Are all of them back projections?
No, it does not necessitate that all
Okay,
of them.
so
Are.
she-
Some,
so she
some of them
narrated-
could be true. Could be true. But
No
it's
problem.
upon you to
So
prove
the
it.
hadith- no problem. So the hadith about stoning, which Matsky and Kara accept as authentic, and she's the source and common link for it. That hadith is legislation outside of the Quran. Why is she narrating it?
Because she's narrating something that is again going about baby things that occurred during the times of the Prophet, but there's also a narration that is saying do not impose a condition that is not found in the book of Allah. So if we are going to accept the concept of abrogation, this is something that could have been abrogated. But again, this narration does not necessitate that these are one of the things that are actually associated to Aisha, because it's contradictory to the Quran.
No, it's not contradictory to the Quran. It's saying that the hadith is saying that these verses are abrogated, meaning they're not in the Quran anymore, but people still recited it. So they can recite a verse that was abrogated. What's the issue?
Okay, so when they're reciting it and it's not in the Quran, is it part of the Quran?
No, it's not part of the Quran. It's an
So why are
abrogated
you
verse.
practicing?
You can still
So why
recite
you
it
practice?
because the
what do
ruling
you-
is not because the ruling is not
Yeah. So Leaf is meant to be questioning, guys. Leaf is meant to be
Sorry.
questioning.
All right.
Yeah, he can ask a clarifying question. I don't mind. But
Mhm.
why the ruling is abrogated, but the verse is abrogating, but the ruling is not abrogated.
Prove it.
I'm saying that's what it is. That's what the hadith says. That's attributed to Aisha, al-Mu'mineen, who you said knows better than you.
That's attributions, but it does not mean that she actually said that. And the other thing that could have been a political push. And the other thing is we have a lot of sources showing that there's things called Israeliyat, which is the influence of the people of the book, which is specifically the Jews.
That's not on the
And
topic.
that's one of
With
the
all due
things that the Jews have. The Jews have the stoning, and you guys are just following a lot of what the Jews say.
Yeah, that's with the previous scriptures, but that's fine.
But that's where
do
we
you believe-
find stoning the adulterer is from. We don't find that in the Quran.
Am I lagging or is he lagging or what's going on?
Yeah, let me pause the
You-
time. So you were lagging a little bit there. So
Yeah.
just try to make sure that your connection's okay. Speak now.
Yeah, can you?
Still lagging. Leafy.
Can I ask a question? Oh,
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, keep speaking. Let me suss it out.
Yeah, can you hear me or no? Because it was cutting in and out for a little bit.
Yeah, so now it's better, yeah.
Now you're better. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll just.
Yeah, and
ask you-
guys, just before I play again. So cross exams mainly, Leafy, you should be questioning him primarily. You can add little comments here and there, but primarily they try to keep questions to him. And then I think let's continue from there. So I'm gonna start the time. I'm gonna give this time an extra 10 seconds because you were lagging. But yeah, so you got 11 minutes 55 seconds. I'm gonna start it in 1. So 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Can you name anyone from the Muhajirin and the Ansar who are hadith rejectors like you?
Zayd
Prove it.
in the Quran.
How is he a hadith rejector?
Oh, I thought you said to name me from the Ansar and the.
I said, Dean, pause the time.
Sure.
You didn't hear my question.
I thought you were asking me a name of Ansari.
No.
Yes. Okay.
No, my question was from.
Understand.
Can you name me from the Muhajirin and the Ansar anyone who was a hadith rejector like you? That was my question.
So, concept of hadith rejection is there is no legislations outside of the Quran, and the Book of God is sufficient for us as guidance. Every single one of them that followed the Prophet in truth, in guidance, would have accepted that, where the Book of God was the criterion, and there's no judgments outside of that.
You're not answering my question. I said, name me someone who believes the same thing you believe and was a hadith rejector the same way you're a hadith rejector. Give me one name of a muhajir or a ansari.
Umar.
Umar was not a hadith rejector the same way you are, but if you think that, then that's fine.
I'm saying Hasbuna Kitab Allah. So when we're going to go with the criterion,
and we're going to doesn't mean I'm a hadith rejector, bro. This
but
is like
you don't understand what hadith rejection is. Hadith rejection means that there's no legislation.
Let me ask you a question.
If I look at the history and I look at the history of hadith, and I can accept whatever I want, but the history is not necessary for the Quran.
No problem, Habibi. Do you have a single scholar who says that Umar was a hadith rejector in the same way you were, who rejected the legislative authority of hadiths? Name me one.
Umar did not practice any legislation authority outside.
I'm asking you to name me a scholar. I'm asking you to name me a scholar that says that Umar rejected hadith as a source of legislation outside the Quran. Do you have a single reference?
Yeah, he himself, his own quote, Hasbuna Kitab Allah.
Okay, no problem. Umar is his own scholar. All right. If okay, do you believe
Bukhari then?
Bukhari was okay, no problem.
Bukhari,
do you believe
Bukhari narrated on
no
Umar,
problem? No problem. Next question. Do you believe in messengers after the Prophet? Because you said there was some that's going to be sent to the Ottomans and to America and to Trump. Do you believe in messengers outside the Quran?
Yes, but there's no prophets after the Prophet.
No prophets, but there's messengers outside the Quran, right? So why did Abu Bakr fight Hurub al-Ridda? Why was he fighting Hurub al-Ridda?
Again, what's that got to do with the Quran and the question?
It's my question. I can ask you whatever I want. Why is Abu Bakr fighting Hurub al-Ridda?
Because he's fighting apostasy and people trying to undermine and subvert their religion like they did in the Abbasid region.
Okay, what was the whole point of Hurub al-Ridda? Do you know?
Again, this is not pertaining to the religion.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's because of Musaylim al-Kadhdhab. He claimed to be a messenger after the Prophet, and the early Muslims came to consensus that there cannot be a messenger outside after the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. But yet you're here telling me that there's messengers after the Prophet. Don't cut me, please, while I'm asking questions. Sure. Do you have any contemporary non-Muslim sources who document the existence of hadith rejectors at the time of the earliest generations of Muslims?
Shafi'i.
Yeah, so Shafi'i, let's pull it up right now. Dean, can you pause my time while I pull up the source?
Yeah, I got you. So you got 9 minutes, 11 seconds left. So guys, while he's pulling it up, I pause the time. So just guys, be sure to send those super chats in. We got again, like all from Muhammad. So if like I said before, those that hold to Muhammad's position, come on the channel, send super chats through so we can get some for Leafy as well. So I'm gonna make that just bigger because it's pretty small. 1 second.
Yeah. So let me just no problem.
Yeah, I'm gonna start the time now. Okay.
Yeah. No. Just wait. I think it's 10 minutes or 9 minutes, something like that. But
yeah, 9 minutes, 10 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just read the source and ask him questions?
And then once you ask the question, I'll start it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what you're quoting, right? So everyone is on the same page. This is from this is from Imam Shafi'i's Jami', right? He says, "I have not heard anyone, whether others counted him or him himself as learned, disagreeing that God Almighty and Exalted has made it obligatory to follow the command of God's Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, and to submit to his judgment. For God has not made it for anyone after him except to follow him, and no statement is binding in every circumstance except God's book or the Sunnah of God's Messenger, and whatever is besides them follows upon them." Right? He goes on to say.
Okay. So yeah, there's more. Okay, go on.
Yeah, there's more. Yeah, it's not too much though. What is obligatory and required is to accept the reports of the messengers of God. This is the Basran Kalami Mu'tazili, like proto-Mu'tazili guy that Shafi'i is arguing with, right? He says, "I said, God has indeed obligated for us to follow the messenger's command." He said, and he quotes the verse that I gave you, وَمَا أَطَاعَكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. And then he said, "It is clear in the revelation that it is an obligation upon us to take what we were commanded and to refrain from what God's messenger forbids us." He said, "I said, and is that an obligation one and the same for us and those before us and after us?" He said, "Yes." So
okay.
I'll continue. Yeah, just let me finish this as well.
Last one,
This is
all
the
right. Yeah. Go on.
Last one. He said, I said to him, I see you have returned to accepting the reports from the Messenger of God with consensus beneath it as corroboration. He said, that is what is obligatory upon me. And I said to him, do you establish matters of blood and inevitable birth? This is about testimony. He said, by testimony, and that is not by encompassing knowledge, thus I have been commanded. So very clearly, this guy who
Okay, wait,
says
one
that
second,
hadith-
1 second, 1 second. Let me get your timer. 1 second. Okay,
No,
This is
three,
not God's
two,
examination.
3, 2, 1, go.
Wait, that's part of his time.
you can, if
No,
you want to read a source,
it was no. If you want to read a source, likewise.
if you read a source, we'll
yeah,
pause it for you. It's the same.
yeah, because it wouldn't be a question or any substance. This is just going back to the source that you provided to Leafy. So let's
Yeah,
start in 3,
no,
2, 1, go on.
Yeah, so this proto-Mu'tazili Basran, who's arguing with Ash-Shafi'i, very clearly reverted back to accepting the Quran and the Hadith. And he wasn't a Hadith rejector in the fullest sense. He only rejected single-strand Hadiths. That's what he rejected. He didn't reject Hadith as a concept, as a whole of legislation outside the Quran. So when you're quoting him and you're saying that he's, he's a Hadith rejector, this is not correct. Can you explain to me why you think he's a Hadith rejector?
Because the thing at the beginning, which you didn't say, حكاية قول الطائفة التي ردت الأخبار كلها. So they rejected the whole narrations. Al-akhbar is the narrations, and it's كلها. So you're just sitting giving me one example, and I'm showing you there's an existence. Of course, the people that are enemies to what we stand on, they're going to sit and give you their point of view, which is wrong. It's the same thing that what we know the majority about the Mu'tazilites is because of what Sunnis wrote about Mu'tazilites. It's not the Mu'tazilites talking about themselves. It's very clear that the early onset of many Muslims, they rejected much of what's being circulated and they stuck to the Quran. And this is also corroborated by Umar, where he was sending somebody to Basra and saying, one of the cities, and he's saying, do not, you're going to a city where the Quran is like the buzzing of the bees. Do not sit and burden them with the narrations.
No worries. So when he says to him, I said to him, I see you have returned to accepting the report of the Messenger of God with consensus beneath it. So, and he says, that is what is obligatory upon me. So has he returned? Has he abandoned his ways of hadith rejection at this point?
Because the problem that was being presented is
yes or no? Just yes or no. Did he abandon his? So he used to be a hadith rejector. He argued with the Shafi'i,
in that story, he was taken out of ignorance, and then yes, he reverted back to idolatry.
Okay, so he's not a hadith rejector by the end of it, right?
Because he was taken back by what the guy said, which was incorrect and unfactual.
Okay, no problem.
It's not about hadith.
Okay, no problem. Is eyewitness testimony dhanni?
Eyewitness testimony is the people that were present there.
No, I'm asking you in general. Is eyewitness testimony dhanni? Is it probabilistic or is it certain knowledge?
People who have seen it to a certain degree is probabilistic, but it's certain. First, no, it's probabilistic because it's based upon what the person.
Which one? Okay, just make it clear because you're waffling.
Let's go. Yeah,
probabilistic. Okay.
Yeah.
So all dhanni evidence is not from God then, because God doesn't obey. God wouldn't command you to govern by something probabilistic. Is that correct?
No, God's laws are not probabilistic.
All right, cool. So when the Quran tells you to go get witnesses for example, the sexual slander of women, why is God then commanding you to use probabilistic reasoning in witnesses?
Because he's bringing four for certainty. It's not just one.
It's not certainty. It's still probabilistic. Even if it's 5, even if it's 10, even if it's 20, it's still
Correct.
probabilistic.
And that's why the lady can say that if may the damnation or the curse be God upon me, if she can testify to God using God as a witness that it's not true.
Okay, but it's still probabilistic because she could be lying, correct? It's not certain. So God is still ordering you to do something that's probabilistic. Okay, so when you say
that's why you need 4. That's why you need 4, and you can invoke the curse of God. God knows that people lie. Sure.
Okay, no problem. So do you have any? Yeah, no problem. Right. So, okay. Again, next question. Do you accept the reports in Sahifat Hammam ibn Munabbih as authentic? If not, why not?
The 12 Sahih?
No, it was 136 prophetic reports. They're later found in Bukhari, Muslim, and Ibn Hanbal.
But wasn't there only 12 that were found?
No.
No, and I don't need to accept that. God says that you do not need to accept anything after God in His verses.
Okay.
So, okay. This is a principle in the Quran.
Okay.
So even if it's authentic, I don't need to.
Even if it's
authentic in 2025, it's not pertaining to me anymore.
Okay. So even if we have authentic reports attributed to the Prophet, you're still not going to accept them.
In this day and age, it's not necessary.
Okay. So when Allah says, "Ati'u Allah, ati'u Rasul, wa ulil amri minkum," who are the ulil amr?
The people in authority. So it depends on the context. So the Quran is an example to all things. So every situation you're going to find a verse of the Quran answering you. So when I'm at home, right, ulil amr would be my parents as a child. If I'm on the streets, it would be the police. If it's in matters of war, it would be the general. That's ulil amr.
Okay, so ulul amr is whoever it is. So at the time of the companions, who would be ulul amr?
When the Prophet was alive, he would be ulil amr. That's why it says
He would be ulul amr. Okay, after he's dead,
is he not after him? It would be the people who are put in charge. Ulil amr.
Okay, so who would they be? Can you name them?
Yeah, some of the companions, some of the leaders,
Name
community leaders, tribal
Give me
leaders. History is showing, for example, Umar.
Umar, right? So Umar, Abu Bakr, Uthman, they would be ulul amr, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and do you disagree that Umar, Ali, Abu Bakr, they all narrated hadiths?
Narrated what they were experiencing. Yes, I accept that, but they were not narrating in things that God has attributed, and all you have is historical records from 150 years or 100 years later trying to prove your position. Show me from the manuscripts around the time and what they were saying, what they were not saying.
Yeah, so when is Sahifat Hammam ibn Munabbih dated?
I don't know, that's yours.
Yeah, it's 70. Do
you have the manuscript and can you show it to us?
Yeah, I did. I had it on the screen. You didn't see it? It's
you showed me the cover. You showed me the cover of it. Yes, and I understand.
If you want the manuscripts, you can go find it yourself. I showed you the publishment and the translation.
Cool.
That's all I need.
What are the things that are saying? Does it talk about the rajm there? Does it talk about the suckling in there? Does it say, very simple question, does it talk?
Well, I don't know why you're asking me questions, bro.
That's fine. to clarify what that book is saying.
Yeah, you can read it in your own time. If you don't know, if you're ignorant about it, you can educate yourself.
I think you're taking the ignorance of the people saying that there's these authentic narrations. So why don't you use that? Why don't they use that?
So I'll ask you a question, brother.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Why does Nicholas Sinai say that according to, I'll go to the point you raised in your rebuttal. You said 3 verse 144, that Muhammad is just a man, many of the messengers passed away before him, etc., right? So this is talking about his future demise. So the Quran knows that the Prophet is going to die. And it's saying that even though it knows that the Prophet is going to die, these verses that we're supposed to obey him, the ones that I cited to you, are still in effect. So he's saying it anticipates a notion of normative practice of the Prophet. So what is that normative practice at the time of the Prophet?
Can you show me how that verse is talking about normative prophet? It says right here. Can we stop so we
can... Yeah, I can stop the time and you can pull it up. So you can show your screen?
Sure.
Yeah, no worries. So are you sharing your screen or do you want me to share my screen?
I'll share it. I'll put it right here.
No problem.
So it states clearly here, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أفإن مات أو قتل انقلبتم على أعقابكم ومن ينقلب على عقبيه فلن يضر الله شيئا وسيجزي الله الشاكرين. And Muhammad is only a messenger before whom messengers had already passed. So if he should die or get killed unalived, would you turn back on your heels? And whoever turns back on his heel, then he will never harm God at all. But God will reward those who are grateful. Okay, so this is in regards to anticipation of practices, or is it anticipation that people are turning away from the back of God, but back from the way of God, where it clearly states that there's messengers before that already passed. So where's the sunnah of the people that passed before him?
Okay.
In the way that you guys
okay, time's back up.
Sure. Yeah, so this verse is only quoted to show that the Quran knows that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is going to die. That's the only reason that this verse is quoted. The verse is, yeah, exactly.
So what's that got to do with
I don't know why you're speaking, brother.
Traditions?
I don't know why you're speaking.
Sorry, you're right. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So this verse is only quoted to show that the Quranic author knows that the Prophet will die, peace and blessings be upon him. The other verses that I quoted to you, like 59:7 and وَمَا أَطَاعَكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا, these verses are the ones that are telling you that you are still supposed to follow the normative practice of the Prophet and that he's a good example and a role model for you, right? So if the Prophet is going to die and we're still supposed to follow his example, where are we supposed to follow his example?
His examples in the Quran.
Where?
وما كنت فظا غليظ القلب إن الله يعلم إنك تقوم أدنى من ثلثي الليل ونصفه وثلثه. God knows that you're standing a third or 2/3 or a half or a third of the night, that you were not hard-hearted. وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم, you are of great moral characteristics, morals. And if the messenger obeys and much of what you did, you guys would have had burden. This is in chapter 3. So we have a lot of characteristics and examples of who the Prophet was.
No problem. All right. Why are non-Muslim sources recording that the early Muslims kept to the tradition of Muhammad to such an extent that they inflicted the death penalty upon anyone who was seen to be against his laws?
Sure, if they're witnessing that they're individuals that are implying rules, that does not necessitate that that's what Muhammad was preaching. It could be political in a sense, such as the law
Okay,
of the
you got 1 minute.
Yeah, no problem.
This doesn't
Abu,
prove your position.
that's your opinion. So why does Abu Bakr, peace be upon him, say that when Umar asked him to change Osama from the army, right? He said, "I would never do that. Are you asking me to do something that the Prophet didn't do?" Is this legislation found inside the Quran? Yes or no?
But Abu Bakr said the same thing about the compilation of the Quran, that the Prophet didn't
Exactly
do it.
right.
He did
So
it. Yeah, so he did
right.
it. But he did it.
No, yeah, but is that instruction
Yeah.
found in the Quran? That's my question.
No, that's his own ijtihad.
That's his own ijtihad, right? And his
Yeah,
ijtihad
correct.
is to
But
follow.
by the way,
Just wait.
Sure. Let me clarify.
Go ahead.
Can I clarify
No,
something?
yeah, go ahead.
He had a direct communication with the messenger, which you and I don't.
No problem. But that direct communication with the messenger is after his death, and he can still consider his orders authoritative even after his death,
Cool.
correct?
But that specific
Okay,
order about
okay,
that
that's
individual in
the.
the army, that specific.
I want one
Let
second.
me
One,
just
one,
make a-
so,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure,
Mom,
let me
you will
make
get
a-
to. I'm trying to give you the time. 1 second. So Leafy, you're out. You're out for questions. So Mohammed, you got the last response to that question. Okay.
Sure. So this proves that even that specific example that he's giving us, it's not pertaining to me or Leafy or anyone else that's alive in this day and age. That whatever command that Abu Bakr got from the messenger or whatever he saw the messengers doing is pertaining to his people. That's the whole concept of what the Quran alone community is showing you, is that it is specific to their people. The Quran is for everybody. So people will apply it differently in the world.
Okay.
No
Okay,
problem.
so that's it for the cross exam for Leafy. So now we're gonna give it to Mohammed. So guys, again, so there's still no super chats from Mohammed's camp. So if you just send super chats in for him, if not, then you're gonna he's just gonna grab random super chats, like I said, or random comments from his section in the live. So if you want to take priority, you're gonna have to come to my channel, send the super chats through. Otherwise, you're gonna be at random and you might not have your question quoted. Okay, so I'm gonna put the time up. Just give me a sec. So it's gonna be 15 minutes. And yeah, Mohammed, if you want any sources like what Leafy did, any sources you want to get up from your intro or Quran verses or whatever, I can stop the time and you can pull it up. Okay.
God bless you, Dean, for being just.
No problem. So I'm gonna start it at 1. So 3, 2, 1.
Leafy, do you agree that the Quran is the final criterion and it judges between us?
Yeah.
And so when God is saying that, for example, that the people that were given a portion of the book, they were called to judge between them using the book of God, they turned away. And they said that is because the fire will touch us for a limited numbers of days. In Sunnism, do you believe that some people will go to the fire a bit and then go to hell or go to heaven eventually?
Yeah, so remember we spoke about this before, and I don't believe your understanding of the hadith that you're going to bring up is correct.
Okay, so do you believe that in Sunnism that people will eventually
there
go
are
to
Muslims. Yeah, there are Muslims who will have their sins. Yeah, they'll be in hellfire for a limited number of time at the same amount corresponding to their sins, and then they'll be entered into heaven. Because Allah says in the Quran, that those who believe and do righteous will enter paradise.
وَغَرَّهُمْ فِي دِينِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. So God states about the individuals that say that they will go to hell for a limited numbers of days, that they have been deluded in their religion and what they're saying. So it's not something that the Prophet would say. Now, very simple. There's a hadith that states that if a man ejaculates first, that the son will look like the father, and if the woman discharges first, that the kid will look like the paternal uncle. Is that scientifically accurate?
Yeah, so this hadith, and I encourage people to watch a video by Brother Muhammad Hijab. He made a video on it on Sapiens. So this hadith, that specific wording is weak. The authentic version is talking about not the discharge, but basically the generations, right? So the way he explained it is,
it's not authentic?
No. The wording you're bringing is not authentic, but there is a version that is
authentic.
The
one that's in Sahih Bukhari is not authentic wording.
No, so with hadith, we don't just cherry pick one version of
No. I just wanted to know.
Clarify or no?
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Yeah, so with hadith, we don't just cherry pick. This is where a lot of hadith rejectors get things wrong. We don't cherry pick one version of the report. We look at all the reports collectively because we understand hadiths are dhanni, they're probabilistic. So we look at all the different reports and then we see which ones have the direct distinctive gist. So even if it's in Bukhari or Muslim or whoever, it doesn't really matter. You look at the distinctive gist, you get rid of the variation, and you look at what is corroborated. And if you do that, then the version that you're talking about is inauthentic.
Okay, so so you do concede that there are some hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that they are called sahih, they're not authentic in method, correct?
Yeah, so parts of that, the variation will be added in by a narrator or
I
like
just wanted a yes or
inauthentic,
no.
that's fine. Yeah, so I said yes. Parts of the hadith would be inauthentic, the variation that's added in because of oral tradition. We know this.
So why is it called sahih again?
Yeah, it's sahih because the overwhelming majority of the content is sahih.
It's not because of the isnad.
The overwhelming majority of the reports are sahih. Isnad is just one way of verifying the historicity or authenticity of something.
So there is a room for error?
In what? In the isnad?
No, in the matans, in the matan of the sahih, there's room for error.
Yeah, that's what dhanni means.
Do we find that in the Quran?
No.
So is that from the same source?
Yes, something can be dhanni and not dhanni and still from the same source.
So just out of curiosity, when God states that if this Quran was not from God, that they will find many contradictions within it. So now you're telling me that this recorded second revelation, that it is from God, yet we find many contradictions with what people are recording. There's a very simple example. There's a hadith that states that you should kill house lizards, and if you kill it with one blow, you get the reward of such. If you kill two, you get the rewards of such. If you kill it with three blows, you get the rewards of such. And then there's another hadith that states that eating lizards is haram. And then there's another hadith that states that eating lizards is halal. So is it halal or haram?
Yeah, so Brother Dean, if I could just share my PowerPoint because I have slides on this. Is that all right, Muhammad?
Yeah, I'll pause it here. So go on.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so let me just scroll down. Yeah. So contradictions in the hadiths. So I'll just go through it generally, then I'll answer your specific question. So even non-Muslim scholars who are revisionists, like Joshua Little, he says that when you apply Sahih methodology.
Okay, wait. So Leafy, I'm gonna have to play the time because this is actually constituting a response.
Yeah.
So
you can play. You can play the time.
Okay,
No
go
problem.
on. And you
But I
can't.
don't want a 5-minute
And by the way, also it can't be too long because you're gonna take away from.
Okay,
time.
but my question is not about the contradictions. My question is it halal or haram to eat lizards? That's my question.
Okay, is that simply what your question is? Just that?
Yeah, my question is, according to your tradition, that there's a report that says that it's halal and there's a report that says it's haram.
Okay, no problem. So he's gonna answer it, and so he's gonna answer that in conjunction.
And I don't need the apologetics, but that's fine. You can go ahead.
Okay, beautiful. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna 1 second, Leafy. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna play the time. Leafy, you got about 20 to 30 seconds to give a response directly to what Muhammad just said, but you can add what you're presenting as well. Okay,
no worries,
so I'm gonna start it in 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, so for specifically the question he's asking me about lizards, I believe eating lizards is haram. That's what I believe personally as a Shafi'i, right? But his question about contradictions in general, I think, is more interesting. According to revisionist scholars, like even Joshua Little, they say that so there aren't many contradictions within the Sahih material, so to speak. So our scholars are aware that there are contradictions in various reports. It's natural with historical documentation that there'll be contradictions. It's to be expected. If there weren't contradictions, that would actually be an issue because it would mean that someone is cheating when they're writing. But the fact that there is contradictions shows that there's genuine transmission, by the way. But the way to get rid of this contradiction...
Okay, Leafy, I'm gonna stop you there because it's getting too long now. So go on, Muhammad.
Okay, God states that when they ask you about the food that you don't say in your tongues that this is halal and haram, and then he recites what is haram, which is the blood, the pork, what has been dead, and the other regulations. There's nothing about lizards there. So this is again going against what the Quran is stating. Now, very simply in the Quran, you do understand that there are some concepts that are talking about the prayer, like certain things about the timing, certain things about the applications of the prayer, correct? There are verses about prayers.
Yeah, there are verses about prayer.
Cool. So if the prayer is primarily taught by the tradition, as you assume, why would God put these verses in the Quran? And then we see a verse in chapter 7 says, do not be loud in your prayer and do not be silent in your prayer. Yet the two prayers that are not found in the Quran, the Dhuhr and Asr primarily, you're silent in them, going directly against the Quran. You think that the Prophet is going to teach against the Quran?
Yeah, no. So it's not going against the Quran. It's just one is a general ruling, one is a specific ruling.
What's the specific ruling?
Yeah, so do not be loud is a general statement, and then you can specify it by saying at certain times you should be quiet, other times you can be speak audibly.
That's not fair because the verse is not saying that. So this is the thing that we keep.
Well, I don't
thinking.
think the verse is the only thing that's authoritative. I believe the Sunnah is also authoritative. So if the Sunnah specifies the Quran, I'm allowed to use that.
Great.
So
I'm
you're
glad.
asking-
I'm glad that you said that. So why is it when that comes down to the judgments and the authorities for the children of Israel, God says, "And bring the Torah and recite it if you're truthful." This is in regards to what's forbidden about food. He said, "Bring the Torah and recite it." He didn't say, "Bring the Torah and whatever else is authoritative outside of the Torah." So where's this other authority that you keep claiming that's in the Quran? Can you please show me that? Give me a verse.
Well, I'll respond to your first part first, and then you said bring me a verse about what was the second part, sorry?
How there's legislations and authority outside of the Quran and halal and haram.
Yeah, no problem. So the thing about the Torah is, and this is noted by Sinai, that when the Quran mentions the Torah, it doesn't literally just mean like the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, but it also has intertext with things outside of that. So the oral tradition and the Tanakh, and that's actually noted by many different scholars. So for example, one of them is.
Sorry, you said a point. I want to push back a little bit. So you're saying that the Torah.
Wait, sorry, a moment. I'm gonna stop the time here because you asked 2 loaded questions. You need to give him some time to respond, and then you can add. Okay. So I'm gonna continue the time now. Go ahead, Leafy.
Yeah, barakallah fik. So, like I said, the Quran is in constant intertext with the oral law, and it calls that the Torah. And this is noted by Sinai. I can get you the reference if you want. It's in his book, the Critical Introduction to the Quran, right? So he notes this there. Now, on your second question, which is about, can you show me any verse that tells us to go outside the Quran? Very simply, chapter 16, verse 44. You can pull it up if you want.
Do you want to do that, guys?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'll pause the time. So you said 1644, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. No problem.
Okay, here you go. So it says here, بالبينات والزبر وأنزلنا إليك الذكر لتبين للناس ما نزل إليهم ولعلهم يتفكرون. With proofs and scriptures, and we have revealed to you the remembrance that you may clarify to the people what was revealed to them. Perhaps they will ponder.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So what is the clarification here?
Yeah, so the clarification is the wisdom, which is the statements and actions and sayings of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and that's meant to clarify the scriptures, which is the Quran, right? So that's telling us to go outside. If I could just finish, so that's telling us to go outside the Quran to the words of the Prophet, and to use them as authoritative in understanding the scriptures.
Okay, so one second. Can I pull up another verse and just ask you about that verse? If you give me a moment,
you can do whatever you want.
I'll pause. Yeah, I'll pause the time again.
Thank you, because I just have to look up the verse.
No problem. So you guys, by the way, 7 minutes and 26 seconds left.
Okay, so we have here verse 3183. Okay, we're going to go to verse 3183 because we're talking about the bayan, right? So, sorry, 183. So, no, sorry. Did I get that right? 138. 138. Okay, so it says here about the Quran, right? And your scholars will agree with this. هذا بيان للناس وهدى وموعظة للمتقين. This is bayan, tabyin, okay? Bayan, declaration for the people, and a guidance and a preachment for the pious. And we clearly see that you said that the Torah is including to the oral statements. So is it fair for me to say that the Quran is inclusive to the oral statements then?
Yeah, so the same word can be used in 2 different senses. It doesn't necessitate that the word tabyin or bayina is necessarily for the sunnah each time it's being used. It can be used for the Quran as well. There's no problem here.
Cool. So it does mean the Quran at certain times.
In this context, yeah.
And in 1644, we believe the same thing. So what we're going to, I just asked you a simple question though, is you said the Torah, because of some Western academic, he's saying that it includes the oral traditions. Is that the same with the Quran? When I say the Quran, does it include the oral traditions as well?
Yeah, so it's not because of a Western academic. I just look at the Quran and I see that it has intertext with the oral tradition, and it calls that Torah, like it literally says, and we revealed in the Torah, and then it'll quote something. For example, it says, we ordained for the children of Israel that, what's called, that
would you like me to put the verse up? I can pause
it. Yeah, nafs and nafs, right? But that's not in the Pentateuch. That's in the oral.
One second. Right? One second. I'm gonna get just get the verse up. Just
here, I'll get it for you.
Get it, yeah. So it should be chapter 5.
I don't know the exact first, but
I think it was
like 43.
I think it was 30.
32. Yeah, 32. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
32. Okay, so it says, "Min ajli dhalik," and because of that, we decreed to the children of Israel. I think in Arabic we should start. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And if I make a mistake in reading, please correct me. "Min ajli dhalik katabna ala bani Israel annahu man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ard فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا ولقد جاءتهم رسلنا بالبينات ثم إن كثيرا منهم بعد ذلك في الأرض لمسرفون." Because of that, we decreed to the children of Israel, whoever kills a soul other than what for others, for another soul of corruption in the land, then it is as if he killed the mankind altogether. And whoever enlives it, then it is as if he enlivened mankind altogether. And our messengers has certainly brought them proofs, but indeed many of them after that were profligates in the land. So is that the verse that you're saying that this is showing?
Okay, so Leafy, I'm gonna start the time now again. You can make your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my point here is very simply that Allah says we have decreed for the children of Israel, and we don't find the statement anywhere in the Pentateuch, in the 5 books of Moses. So, but we do find it in the oral tradition, in the oral Torah that they had, which shows that the Quran is very clearly saying that there's revelation that is given to the children of Israel that is preserved extently in the oral law.
Just the question: is the Torah corrupted, and is it missing things that is? Has the Torah been corrupted, and God states that they conceal much of what they've been given?
Depends what you mean. So there's 2 Torahs. That's when the word Torah. If I can just speak, I'll answer your question.
Saying the ones with the children of Israel, was there any forms of corruptions in any forms of the Torah?
Yes, there is corruption in one of the forms of the Torah, but the Torah is used in 2 senses. If I could just finish.
I was asking a yes or no. I don't.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
So, and is it fair to assume that that was part of the Torah and then they've removed it, but it's stuck with their books and traditions? Is that fair to assume that?
I wouldn't make that historical statement, no, but I would just say that it was preserved in the extant or oral tradition. I wouldn't make a claim about how it got there.
So perfect. So now what we're saying is that there was secondary revelation that's outside of the Torah that was preserved. And when God is saying the word Torah, it would include this secondary revelation. So can I assume that about the Quran? When I say the Quran, would it also include the oral traditions?
No, so that's not what I'm saying about the Torah. What I'm saying is, that's why I wanted to give you the clarification, is that there's 2 senses which the word Torah is being used in the Quran. One talking about what was literally given to Moses, right? And Allah calls it the Kitab as well, right? And then you have the Torah, meaning what is found at the time of the people at Muhammad's time, right? And that Torah that's found at the time of the Prophet is not the same as the one given to Moses. Obviously, there's a big distinction between the 2, right?
I see your point. And this pushes me back to I understand what you're saying. So in chapter...
I didn't finish answering your question, but because you asked me, can we assume that the Quran is also including the oral tradition? So no, because
you said no. Perfect.
No,
that was the point that I was making. Because in chapter 3, this is with the Torah that's present with them. God states, and bring the Torah and recite it if you're truthful about halal and haram. And that's the point that we're making. Halal and haram is in the Quran. Now, there's clearly also a tradition that is being presented about the children of Israel when they were ordered to sacrifice a cow. This is revelation that's outside of the Quran pertaining to that specific group of people. They sacrificed the cow because they've murdered, unalived somebody unjustly, and God brought him back to life. Now, is that a living tradition where every time they unalive somebody, they have to sacrifice a yellow cow? Yes or no?
Sorry, repeat your question. I didn't really understand. What's the living tradition?
So in the Torah, in the Quran, we have a story about Moses getting revelation, ordering his people to sacrifice a yellow cow because they unalived somebody unjustly, and through that yellow cow, the golden no, bro. Inna Allah ya'murukum an tadhbahu baqara. God is ordering.
Oh, right. Yeah. So sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a revelation that's outside of the book of God, where Moses is ordering people to do something that God has revealed. Is that a living tradition, or is it only specific to his people?
I think it's only specific to his people, yeah.
Perfect. So the things that you keep narrating that the prophet about his outside revelation is only pertaining to his people. So when God states, for example, flanked them from outside of the behind the mountain, as an example, that would be specific to his people. When we're talking about the rules and legislations of God, it's coming directly from the Quran. And the final question for you is hadith. Is that narrations? Akhbar, is that narrations? Yes or no?
Hadith akhbar? Yeah, hadith khabar, yeah.
Perfect, but the hadith and nabawiyya, the ones that you attribute to the prophet, prophetic, is that revelation from God?
Some of it, yes.
3 minutes.
Define ayah.
Define ayah. Ayah has many meanings. A sign or a verse.
Okay, a sign or a verse. Can it mean revelation?
It can mean revelation, yeah.
So are the hadith an ayah?
No, hadiths are not ayah in that sense, but there are revelation. They're just a different form of revelation.
So God tells us to believe in his ayat and do not believe in any hadith after that. So if it's not ayat, so why am I believing in it?
Yeah, so you're equivocating on the word hadith. Whenever Allah uses the word hadith there, he's not talking about Bukhari, Muslim, and the speech of the Prophet. He's
He's
just
talking
saying
about all
speech in general.
prophets. Yes, speech
That's
in
your-
general, and you're
that's your-
giving me general. You're giving me general speech, exactly. So when you don't want to define ayats as revelation from God, but you're saying that I'm backdating the word hadith.
I said I have no issue defining it as revelation. There's no problem,
So-
but you just have to do it with the correct understanding.
So the word ayat is generally understood as revelation that is coming from God. That's why God states that send us a messenger. The disbelievers will say, if God did not send a messenger, right, in the Quran. Can I bring up the source?
Yeah, no worries.
Yes, so I'll pause the time for that.
نتبع آياتك. Give me 1 second. So this is in verse 2134. Yes, so I'm going to share the screen. It says, ولو أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولو أن أهلكناهم بعذاب من قبله لقالوا ربنا لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا فنتبع آياتك من قبل أن نذل ونخزى. And if only we had annihilated them with a punishment before they would have said, our Lord, why did you not send a messenger to us that we could follow your ayats, your verses, before we were humiliated and disgraced? So we are supposed to follow ayats. We're not follow hadith, and you won't qualify. Sorry, you can start the time. You're not qualifying the hadith. You're not qualifying the hadith as ayats, and it's clearly overall in the Quran to follow ayats. So, are you willing to qualify the hadith as ayats?
Yeah, so that's just a non sequitur, brother. So just because Allah says follow something, that doesn't mean you can't follow something else as well. He's not saying don't. What you would have to show is a verse that says don't follow any speech outside of the Quran. Nothing in the Quran says that. So when you say, for example, just let me finish my answer, Barakallah fiqh. So this verse here, when you translate ayat as verses, I have no issue with that. That doesn't mean anything. We can grant that the people are asking for signs or for verses or for revelation from God so they can follow it. There's no issue. But I don't have to qualify the hadith as an ayah. You're basically just saying for me to follow the hadith, it should be Quran. I don't believe that. That doesn't follow.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to express is that God is giving you the legislations and he's telling you what to follow, which is the ayats.
1 minute.
Now it doesn't, I don't see anywhere in the Quran where it's telling me that there is revelation that's outside of the Quran that I need to stick to when I am not hearing the messenger. Is Gabriel a messenger of God?
Is Gabriel a messenger of God? Yeah, he's a messenger of God.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's an angel. Angels don't die.
Is Jesus a messenger of God?
Yes, and he's still alive.
According to you, is Jesus coming back?
He is coming back, correct?
So messengership has not been sealed, and there's messengers after the blessed prophet that come to this world.
No, not really. No,
so Jesus is not coming back.
Well, do you want me to answer the question or?
Yeah. Is Jesus coming back?
Yeah, no, I already said he is coming back, but that doesn't mean
he's a messenger.
No problem. Can I speak or no?
Sure.
You want to do gotchas? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So when Jesus is coming back, peace and blessings be upon him, his role is no longer as a messenger, even though he retains that title, because he's already given the message. The whole point of being a messenger is to give the message to the people, which is to Bani Israel. And this is found even in the biblical corpus. Even though it's corrupted, you can still see it. He says, I've been sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. He makes that very clear. So his message is only to the lost sheep of Israel. So when he comes back, he's not going to give you legislation after the fact. Likewise, Gabriel, peace and blessings be upon him, his mission is done. He's not going to give new revelation to new prophets. You believe that. You believe he's going to give what's called a message to Donald Trump and to the Ottomans and to whoever else. We don't believe that as Sunnis.
Okay, so the time's up, but I'll let Muhammad give one last question.
So what I was trying to say is very simple, is that God has showed us that individuals that are not messengers, they also receive revelation from God, like the mother of Moses and the disciples of Jesus. So revelation is ongoing, and these are messengers that are being sent to God to show this revelations to specific individuals. And I think that is very clear. So messengership has not been sealed. God still sends angels to specific individuals to inspire them. And to say that that has been sealed is against the Quran, where God states that prophethood is sealed. but nowhere does it say it's things. So my final question, I'm sorry, it says that do not follow inclinations, right? Ahwa, right? And it says that the majority of the people as well in a different verse that they follow dhann, assumptions, right? So you are telling me now that the hadith is guesswork through assumptions, and that yet we still have to follow it after we give our
So
allegiance to scholars.
Mohammed, you have to, yes, because I
Yeah,
gracefully
yeah,
let you
perfect.
I gracefully let you ask the final question. Just
Thank
make
you.
it very
And
succinct and concise.
give him the floor to answer as long as we
Yeah.
want. I'm saying that
So what is the question here?
Yeah, I got his question. He's just asking about hadith being guesswork and not to follow hawa, and the majority of people are gonna follow. Right? That's your
Okay,
question.
yeah.
it says وأكثرهم يتبعون الظن وإن الظن
Yeah,
لا يغني من الحق شيئا.
Yeah, no problem. I agree. So that
Yeah.
the word dhan there is translated as conjecture, no problem. But you yourself admitted that the Quran is telling us to follow dhan because witnesses are dhan according to you. So that means the Quran is condemning itself by your understanding, which is obviously kufr. So my understanding of dhan here is conjecture, which is something without proper evidence, because the Quran tells us to use your mind, your reason. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. So when we make sound assumptions and judgments and use probabilistic reasoning, that does not count as hawa. Hawa is like speculative reasoning without evidence. When I use evidence, like I show you the Sahifa of Hammam ibn Munabbih, I quote you scholars, I bring you manuscripts, and you don't respond to any of that, then what that shows me is that you're unable to engage with the actual arguments and evidence being presented, with all due respect to yourself. So to summarize my answer, it's very clear. The word hawa here is not in any way correlated to the hadith in any way, shape, or form. If it did, then you'd have to condemn the Quran, because by your own admission, the witnesses are dhanni. So the Quran is condemning itself according to your understanding.
Okay, so guys, we're going to enter into the closing statements. Again, final reminder, guys, for the Q&A, because after the conclusions, we're going to enter into the Q&A. If you want your questions prioritized, you're going to have to come on the channel and type up the super chat, and we will go in chronological order. I'm going to try to do one question for each debater. So, inshallah, look out for that. At the end, after the closing statements, we're going to enter into the Q&A. So the closing statement, we're going to start with Brother Leafy, and then we'll give it to Muhammad after. So you got 5 minutes, Leafy, and I'll do 3, 2, 1. So 3, 2, 1. Leafy, there?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear
go
me?
ahead.
Sorry, I just cut out for a bit. Yeah, so I appreciate the interlocutor for the debate, Barakallah fi, for coming, obviously, and discussing. I appreciate him coming along and being respectful. Obviously, that's something that I praise. But I don't think he dealt with my arguments in any, scholarly way, or even began to really tackle the series of issues. So, I mean, I really put a lot of effort into this presentation, as I hope you guys can tell. And I'm kind of sad, disappointed that he didn't really engage with the arguments and syllogisms that I brought. So for each point that I brought, I actually brought syllogisms and I put it up on the screen, and I asked him to address them in his opening statements, which I don't think he did. So for example, with Abu Bakr and Aisha, I gave him a syllogism. He didn't really interact with it, and the other ones as well, he didn't really interact with either. But nonetheless, I think it was a good debate. So let me just touch up on a final few points that I didn't get to address during the cross-exam that he said in his rebuttal. So he talked about modernization and that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, if he was he would have had a different sunnah. Well, no, not really, because he doesn't understand what sunnah is. So the Prophet might have implemented the sunnah differently, because the sunnah is malleable. It changes based on time and location. That's true. We as Muslims, as Sunnis, we accept that. No problem. But the usul of the sunnah, the foundations of the sunnah, to protect your, for example, to protect your mal, to protect your wealth, to protect your haya, your livelihood, to protect your children, etc. All these qawaid, they're going to be the same. They're not going to change depending on time and place. So again, this is just reasons. Essentially, all this comes down to, this hadith rejection is reasons to liberalize the religion. You find something that doesn't match your aql, it doesn't match your mind, your 21st century understanding of the world, therefore you want to reject it and say the Prophet didn't say it. That's just the easiest thing to do. But this is an intellectually lazy way of approaching the hadith corpus and approaching Islam, because the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, has authentic material that's narrated from him, which my opponent himself accepted. He said, even if it's authentic, even if the Prophet said it, I don't want to follow it. So what kind of I'm sorry, anyone with any rationality would know not to follow his hawa. This is his understanding of the Quran and nothing else. He didn't really bring me much scholarship or challenge me
3
on
minutes.
any points. Yeah, barakallah feek. He also made the point about isnad origins, and I have a whole video refuting Dr. Joshua Little on this. You guys can watch on my channel, where I cook him on the origins of isnad. He tries to say that it was at the time of the second fitna, but I show that it was actually at the time of Uthman radiallahu an. So again, he just regurgitated this point that's already been refuted, and it's there on my channel. Yeah, and then what else did he say? Yeah, so the cross exam, he was talking about hadith being dhanni. He was bringing Quran verses, trying to show that there's contradictions. Yeah, I mean, let me grant, like, there are some contradictions in hadith that are weak. There's no issue with that. That doesn't disprove the fact that the muhaddithin received a genuine core of traditions that are authentic to the Prophet. How does that disprove that? Let's say I grant you that some hadiths have contradictions in them. So what? How does that refute the thesis that Az-Zuhri received a genuine core of sayings and words of the Prophet that are authoritative? That why shouldn't we follow them? And to get rid of these contradictions is very simple. You just look at general versus specific, the authenticity of the report, if one abrogates the other, if there's hyperbolic speech, the nature of the contradiction, etc. And this is something that al-Muhaddithin have written entire volumes on. So again, this is not something new or unknown. So for example, Ibn Jazwi states, any hadith that you see contradicting fundamental reason or principles in Islam, then know that it's forged. Every hadith that contradicts the Sunnah is cast away. Again, so we have our principles. This is not something new that we don't know. I brought some other objections, but he didn't even bring them up. So, for example, hadith is subjective. I was going to go through that. Hadiths have anachronisms. I was going to go through that. But he didn't really bring any of these strong objections. To be honest, I feel like I was arguing with myself half the time. But yeah, I feel like nevertheless it was still a good debate. I don't think he was able to address any of the points substantively, and I think a lot of his beliefs are, with all due respect, like nonsensical. Like, how can you believe there's a messenger after the Prophet who's going to come to Donald Trump? I don't know how you can believe that, to be honest. But what I want you guys to understand is that even within hadith rejectors, within their own circles, they disagree on a bunch of stuff.
1 minute.
Once you let go of the Sunnah, then you open Pandora's box, and you can't shut it back after you've opened it. Once you open Pandora's box, then it's just your aql and your understanding. You like something, you take it. You don't like something, you don't take it. And that's why you see hadith rejectors are the ones who have more sex than anyone else. He brought up the hadith of 73 sex, which, by the way, is inauthentic. It's only a statement of Ali. It's marfu' to the Prophet. Hadith rejectors themselves can't agree on whether to pray towards Mecca or whether it was actually in Petra or this or that, and they just run with any revisionist theory. Yeah, barakallah fiqh. They run with any revisionist theory that seems convenient to them, like Fred Donner or Joshua Little or whatever. And akhi, this is not your way to live your life. You're going to be constantly modernizing and changing your religion, and that's not a way to live your life. Rasulullah came as a messenger for all of humanity, and his usul, his principles that he laid down are timeless. So regardless of time and place, regardless of modern era, regardless of what new technology comes in, the principles of the Sunnah stand 1,400 years old, and they have yet to be challenged.
Last time.
Yeah, but yeah, that's it. You can end it there. Barakallah fiqh.
Okay. So Muhammad will get your conclusion as well. So just give me a sec for that. So just at 3, 2, 1. So 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, this individual, my interlocutor, Leafy, he was presenting that the Quran is teaching and telling the Prophet that he has to teach a concept called sunnah, which what they're qualifying as that something that we see as secondary revelation that we find in these other concepts that they have written down. He's saying that I did not engage. It's the fact that I was engaging to show that what you're writing down, there's so much contradictions and there's so much convoluted material that to dive into it, whatever report that you're going to bring to me, I can show you a report that negates it. And therefore you're sitting there with guesswork, which you clearly said that it's probabilistic. Now, these contradictory issues, you want to sit and champion the hadith that works for you, and you quickly want to just, as you said, we can explain away the problems. And this is called apologetics, which we don't find this in the Quran. Now, yes, of course, people are going to understand the Quran differently, which is something that we also find in Sunnism. It's not just in our group. This is the understanding of, that's the flaw of the human nature. This is something that's extremely clear. Now, if we look into Sunnism, we have concepts like the ISIS and all of that, that is coming out of hadith. We clearly see that the early onsets of the early pictures of Mecca before the Saudi government, there was 4 boxes, one for each madhab, and each one of them would pray by themselves, and they would not pray with the other people, and they would also marry within themselves because of this extremism that comes from hadith. It does not come from the Quran. So whatever he's talking about, the sects that we find in Quran alone, we don't call ourselves sects. God says that there's different believers, ta'ifat, and they shouldn't fight among each other, and that we should hold on to the rope of God. But God tells us about the Christians that they did become sect, and then there's animosity between them until the day of judgment, and we can clearly see that between the Sunnis and the Shias because of this hadith corpus. He also conceded that the Quran was not ordering that the children of Israel, the people who received books before us, to go out to other sources other than the book of God. It was always saying the Torah and the Gospel. He went as far as saying, oh no, the oral
3 minutes.
He said the oral traditions are also the ones that are part of the Torah because we don't find it, but then he conceded that there was some corruption, so we can also understand that it was part of the Torah, and that's why it's called the Torah. But then he won't go as far as saying that the Quran and the oral traditions go hand in hand in regards to what God calls as the Quran. So the inconsistency of delivering what the Quran is saying is the thing that we push back upon them. If God wanted us as a universal religion, as God states that the sending of the blessed Prophet Muhammad is for all of mankind, then we have to understand that mankind has different cultures, different traditions, and different ways of approaching life, which the Quran solves. So the way that people would pray would be a little different, and that's why we see it in the Madahib. They can go back and keep attributing it to the Prophet Muhammad, but this is all conjecture. He's saying to not follow conjecture. This is all exactly conjecture. It's all circular reasoning. It's one man giving the quality to somebody else, but if we look at someone else's narration about this specific individual, the other person is putting him down. So who are we going to trust? So you just pick your favorite Marvel superstar, and that's the person that you're going to idolize, whether it's Maliki, Shafi'i, or a few of them, and this is how you're going to approach your religion. The religion was not based on history. It's not about these historical facts. The history started with Adam, and the history started with the other messengers and the ibra that's inside them. So as he conceded that in this day and age, the usul al-sunnah would be the same, which is the usul of the sunnah, which we find in the Quran, the tradition, which we do not deny that there's traditions for believers, because God talks about it. The praying, the giving the zakats, the sacrificing in the name of God, treating your parents well, standing at the prayers at the times of the prayers, talking to people nicely, the covenants of God. Those are the traditions that we do not deny. The applications of what they're showing us is clearly flawed because of what the Quran is showing. So he also talked about me not answering these concepts because in that world of theirs, there's so much confusions where he's like, oh, I just cooked this guy in regards to what he said here, because there's reports of what this man is pushing anyways, where you have reports that are negating them. That's the problem with history overall in all of the world. Now, there is one concept that he didn't push. Part of Sunnism is Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And I did ask him about the Jama'ah, and we didn't have time to talk about it, where they say there's a consensus. But God shows us that if the consensus was right around the Queen of Sheba, they wanted to go attack Solomon and they would have lost. So Sheba as a singular, she was doing the right thing. And it's the same thing when Talut became a king. The consensus said that he shouldn't be a king, but he was the king ordered by God. So the whole concept of Sunnism is flawed just because of the verses of the Quran. God never points outside of the Quran for judgments of legislation.
30 seconds.
The Prophet taught the Quran. The Prophet taught the Quran, and the Prophet did not tell us to follow the Jama'ah other than what they want to show in the Hadith books, which is circular reasoning. Because God tells us that the actual, as even in their own narrations, that the Islam is strange. It started strange, and then it's going to come back to being strange. This is what they say. These are things that can be observed in the Quran, what we see, because Islam is the cornerstone of it. The Quran, the cornerstone of it is Islam, the Islam that we follow, the blessed Prophet, the cornerstone is the Quran. And the Quran tells us that the people will take it forsaken. And that's what we've seen.
Okay, thanks for that. So now, guys, just in the Q&A section. So how we're going to do this is we're going to do one question each. So if you want questions towards each person, we're going to prioritize the super chats right now. So what's going to happen is, inshallah, they're going to get a question asked to them just to save time. We're going to just do the person who's being asked as answering, and then no back and forth. Okay, so Leafy won't get a say when Muhammad gets asked, and vice versa. Okay, so let's pull this up. This will be the first question.
Wait, I won't get a say, so it's just he's gonna answer and then I answer. Like just
how do you guys? Because there's too many questions. Like we won't be able to get through all of them if we do that.
Yeah, no worries. Then then no problem.
Okay. So how do you know so this is for Muhammad. So how do you know the Prophet ﷺ's history from the Quran without the Hadith?
The position of Quran alone is that legislation comes from the Quran. Whatever is happening in history, people have to open history books to read about it. It's not necessary information for guidance.
Okay, so let me try to get a question for Leafy.
I have a question for Leafy. If someone didn't.
Go on.
So someone says, if the Quran says it's a clear book, easy to understand, why do you need hadith to explain what God already said is clear?
Yeah. So when Allah says, and this is a verse Quran only people love to use and distort, which is that Quran is tafsir kulla shay. And Quran is the best hadith, and all of these things are true, and I agree with them. But that doesn't mean that there can't be something outside the Quran to clarify things that are ambiguous in it, because the Quran itself says in chapter 3, verse 7, that there are verses that are muhkamat, unambiguous, and then there are verses that are ambiguous. So the Quran itself is telling you that there are things that are ambiguous that you need to go outside of the Quran in order to clarify. And the one who does the clarifying is the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him.
Okay. So next one. You cite sources. So this is from Muhammad. You cite sources saying Umar. I don't know what he meant by that.
I think
Hated
narrated hadith.
or narrated. I'm not sure. Hadith and how Abu Hurairah wrote it. That's assuming it contemporary. I thought hadith was made by Bukhari. And so he's basically saying is he's trying to say that you're citing sources that concede a point that hadiths were early on narrated and implemented.
I think what he's saying that I am citing hadith to show that there is hadith prior to Bukhari.
So the Umayyads and Bukhari, yeah.
Yes, so but the point back is that these are concepts that you guys believe in. So I'm using your sources against you. I'm showing you that these sources, there are even within your sources people that are championing that the Quran is the only legislation and God is the only judge, and that God is saying that the Quran is sufficient, even in your own sources, that I don't need to believe what the Quran is saying. I'm trying to show you that your position is like the Jews and the Christians.
So just to clarify, because just to clarify for the audience, do you actually believe that the hadiths and so on and the Sunnah is made up by Bukhari and the Umayyads or not? If you just clarify that point.
I think there was a political means behind the hadith, so it was written and some of it was fabricated to put other people down, like Shias or other sects. So some of it was fabricated and some of it was manipulated, and it was handpicked to it shows even in your own sources that some hadith that was deemed strong, that was deemed sahih, was weakened by the Abbasids because it would have disqualified much of what they were preaching at the time. So it's politically driven.
Okay. So this is for Leafy. Why didn't Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam register inspiration outside of the Quran into the Quran? Then God Almighty would preserve it. I don't know exactly what he's saying there. Do you understand?
Yeah, I think he's saying why aren't hadiths in the Quran? Because they don't need to be in the Quran. Look, the Quran is the words of God verbatim. Hadith are the words and sayings and actions and the life story of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. They're two completely separate genres. One is Kalamullah verbatim. One is the Kalam and the actions and sayings of the Prophet and his companions that we extract wisdom from. So to put them together is completely nonsensical. They're distinct genres. Like he said, one is history and we derive law and legislation from it, and one is literally the words of Allah. Otherwise, we'd be like the Jews and the Christians who put the words of God and the words of the prophets together, which is obviously nonsensical.
Okay. So this is from Muhammad. How do you know the Quran is preserved without hadiths, without falling to circular reasoning? How would you explain the 10 and also how would you explain the 10 modes of recitations without hadith?
We saw historical evidences to prove what God has already said, that the Quran is preserved, and there's many ways to prove that the Quran is from God, and you're saying that it's circular reasoning to quote the book of God to a Muslim, and it's a flaw on your end. And how would you explain the 10 modes of recitation without hadith? The QCT shows that there is one text and that people were reading it differently. That's the difference between water and water. So individuals were reading it differently, and there was more than 10 recitations that they attributed back to the Prophet. So this is again historical inconsistency. It's not a shot against the Quran, as you're trying to show that the Quran is insufficient.
Okay.
Tomatoes.
Yeah. So if you could, Muhammad, just get a question on your end.
Okay. Let me see if someone did. 1 minute. Let me see if I have one. Anyone have a question from here? Let me see why. There's questions that are not really.
If you want to ask me a question, that's fine as well. I don't mind.
No, I don't think that's fair.
But if see my comments as well. Leafy, no, they're not relevant.
Let me. Most of it is So let me see if there's any new comments. Look at.
I'm just not as popular as you, Muhammad. They love you.
Okay. So this is a question. Let me see. So since you need to marry a concubine if she gets pregnant?
No,
What
no,
if she does
no.
not?
Wait,
Bro, what are you
sure
reading,
that? Are
bro?
you sure that's? Are you sure that's relevant? That's
No,
what I was gonna read.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
That's okay. That's okay.
but actually, yeah, I don't want to ask questions because it's not fair.
You can
Uh,
ask a
go back
question
and
as long
forth.
as it's on topic. I don't
okay,
mind.
here. I think I go in here. So he asked, why didn't he register as a secondary book? But Leafy didn't understand the question. I think that's for the other question. So basically, what he's saying is he thinks that the previous questioner was trying to say that why didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or Allah subhanahu wa taala reveal to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a second book, which is the Hadith, with the Quran? Why didn't he put two books together?
So what you're telling me is Allah is going to reveal the Quran, His speech, and then He's going to reveal to the Prophet what's going to happen to him while he's still alive. So He's going to reveal to him that he's going to do hijrah and that he's going to die at this day and he's going to do this and that's going to be sent down from Allah. I mean, the absurdity speaks for itself, akhi.
Oh, you can see my comment, the comments on my channel. Okay, Dean, you can pick from the questions. Yeah,
I got you. So let's go to this one. Yeah, we read that one. So this guy misspelled. So he's meant to say Quran chapter 9, verse 100. Okay, so Surah Tawbah, verse 100. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to follow the Ansar and Muhajirun. Why reject their understanding when we have clear verses that Allah is pleased with them?
so this is al-sabiqun al-awwalun. So the people who migrated first. So this is even with Tabari's exegesis, he's agreeing with this because the Quran also gives you other verses about this specific verse. So there was the first group that immigrated, and then there's the people that helped them, Ansar, right? And then there's second people that followed. Okay, the people that followed in immigration, those are the people that God has, but they followed in goodness. There's individuals that followed in hypocrisy, and it wasn't bin ihsan. And you can see the same thing, and I think in Surah Hashr, right, where it says, الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا. So the people that came from after them, they say, God, please do not let us have burdens in our hearts against our believers. While the believers that came before, they love to give from what they've been given. So this is not about tiba' in the way that you want to understand it. It's the people who followed the first immigrators.
Okay,
And
so
this
let's
is
do this
again,
one
this is again in Tabari.
Okay, so let's do this for the both of you. For the Quran and the Sunni, the Quran, sorry, and the Sunni, what are the jinns according to your positions?
Do you want to go first?
The jinn is in the unseen world. These are demons. These are entities that don't have physical access to the world, and they are pushing ideas into individuals, and they try to possess individuals by making them follow falsehood. Iblis is a jinn.
Yeah, so jinn mentioned in the Quran, there's a chapter on them, Surah Jinn. They're beings from the unseen that are made from fire. Like my interlocutor said, Iblis is a jinn, and there are different types of jinn. Some of them are Muslim, some of them are Christian, some of them have all kinds of different belief, and they can interact and influence the world. That's who jinn are.
Okay, so there's one here. Leafy, did the Prophet ﷺ have concubines? If so, can you tell us if you would allow this in war today? There are captives and there's still slavery in places like Congo.
Yeah, so the Prophet did have concubines, and this is mentioned in the Quran as the people of your right, of your right hand possession, right? And this is a normal practice at the time of the Prophet, that you would take concubines and contemporary to his time. So there's no issue with that. That doesn't mean we have to do it today, just like slavery was outlawed then and abolished then. We don't have to bring back slavery. So by the consensus of all the scholars, you don't need to bring back concubinage. It was simply there as a product of its time. And the Prophet engaged with it in order to get to the ultimate goal of getting rid of it.
Okay, so this is from Ustad Dawood. Barakallah feek for the super chat. So either over so this is from Muhammad, either over 99.9% of the Ummah have been blind to Allah's guidance since the beginning, or less than 1% are actually delusional revisionists who think they finally discovered the truth in 2025 on YouTube. So referencing yourself.
So this is something that we understand about the human nature, is this our position was actually prevalent in the believers community at the very onset, and it's still going to be prevalent. It's not going to be the majority. Just like how in Christianity we have Unitarian Christians that are on more solid ground than the Trinitarian, yet the Trinitarian outweighs them. We have Karaite Jews that also stick to the Torah, which they don't believe that they have the land of Israel, and they stick to what the book says. And these are more guided, and they're usually more accepting of the Quran than the other groups, and they are a minority. Being a minority does not mean that you're misguided. The majority is, in fact, misguided, and that's what God has clearly showed us in the Quran. And it's not 10 years after the blessed prophet, it's 1400 years after the blessed prophet, and it's very clear that now our position is a lot more solid in the day and age that we live compared to people that want to lock it back to 1400 years ago.
Okay, so this is for Leafy. On that same verse, so this is chapter 3, verse 7. On that same verse, God says about those ambiguous verses that no one knows its true interpretation except God.
Yeah, what's the issue?
I think
So I think she's asking.
I think she's
How
asking.
would the prophet know? How would the prophet know?
Yeah, so when Allah says that no one knows ta'weelah, its true interpretation except Him, we accept that and we submit. But that doesn't mean that we can't know what the ta'weel of it is. When Allah says "Qul huwallahu ahad," we know what that means. But do we know what that means in the fullest sense, the same way Allah knows what "Qul huwallahu ahad" means? Of course not. But that doesn't mean we don't have some understanding of what it is. Otherwise, that means the whole Quran is unintelligible. We can't understand anything from it. So obviously, this verse is not like to be taken literally, that we can't understand anything from the Quran. I don't think my interlocutor would agree with that either. Obviously, we can understand the Quran. It is meant for us to understand. That's the whole point of sending it down as revelation. But when it says no one knows its true interpretation except Allah, that means that we can speculate about, okay, this means this means that, for the ambiguous verses. But their true meaning is only for Allah. Like for example, alayha 19, upon it are 19. Some scholars said it's 19 angels. Other scholars disagreed and they made another ta'weel. But its true ta'weel is only known to Allah. Does that mean the rest of the Quran is unintelligible? Of course.
I think her question is, would the Prophet know the correct ta'weel?
Yeah, the Prophet would know the correct ta'weel.
Yep. Okay. So let's get the next one up. From Muhammad, how do you reconcile your position with Allah's speech in this verse? I think you quoted that earlier in Surah An-Nisa.
وَمَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولِ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ, and whoever obeys the messenger obeys God. So there is a concept of obeying where he is the general, he is the president, he is the king, he is the man in position of power. If you are following and giving a bay'ah to this person of authority who is also a messenger, so he's above a king, he's above a president, he's in one of the highest forms of authority, but he does not have the ability to do halal and haram. If the messenger wants to tell me to give him a glass of water, and I give him a glass of water, I have obeyed God by obeying with the messenger's order. If the messenger is telling me get ready for war, I'm going to get ready for war. I'm not going to sit and debate with the messenger what he's saying. But if the messenger is telling me, oh, it's halal for you to eat pork, and he just finished reading a verse saying that it's haram to eat pork if there's other foods, and he's putting me in a situation going against the book of God, I am not allowed to obey him, because I have to obey God before. What if the prophet tells you it's time for you to do idolatry? You can't accept that. And what we're saying is your hadith books is negating verses of the Quran. So we do not believe that this is obeying the messenger when he's saying things that are wrong.
Okay.
Dean, that was a good question by Gospel Unitarian. I don't know if you can see it.
Gospel Unitarian was in the super chats, or that one? Okay.
No. Yeah.
Go on.
So he said, Leafy, Ibn Sirin said they did not ask about the isnad, but when the fitna erupted, they said, name to us your men. Yeah, so this is an authentic hadith attributed to Ibn Sirin. And I think the questioner was asking about when the isnad originated. So I have a whole video on this you can watch on my channel, refuting Oxford scholar Dr. Joshua Little on this very hadith, his understanding of it. And I show how this hadith, the fitna being referenced here, is the first fitna, the maqtal of Uthman, radiallahu an. And one of the evidences I used to show this is another hadith from Ibn Sirin that says, ثارت الفتنة وأصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 10,000 لم يخف منهم 40 رجلا. That when the fitna occurred, there were 10,000 of the companions of the Messenger of God alive, and only 40 of them participated in it. So this clearly shows that the same fitna that Ibn Sirin was talking about was when there was 10,000 companions still alive, which was only possible at the time of the first fitna, which is Maqtal Uthman, not later at the second fitna, which was at the time of Mukhtar.
Okay, thanks for that. So this is 1 second. So we've got a couple questions here for Leafy in a second.
I have a question here where sorry, let me bring it back up. If you find one, then
yeah, so this one from SJ. So this from TikTok actually. So if hadith rejection were the prophets, so this from Muhammad, if hadith rejection were the prophet's religion, how did all of the early Muslims agree the prayers are 5? with 2, 4, 4, 3, and 5 rak'ahs when the Quran nowhere specifies these numbers?
Because according to what the Quran is saying, the two that you're silent in, they're actually not prayers. It's time of tasbih. That's why there's no reflection on the Quran during that time. And you don't have 5, you have 6. And one of them is optional so that you don't fall into the category when God is saying about the middle prayer, right? Salat al-Wusta. You can't have Salat al-Wusta when there's 6. The one that's after the rising of the sun, you make that as optional. You're calling them prayers, but God never called them prayers. The 3 prayers in the Quran are the ones that you do practice, where you do say the Quran out loud, where it is how God instructed us in the Quran, which is the Fajr, the Maghrib, and the Isha, the 3 times. The other 3 times, which is al-Subh or al-Duha and Maghrib, Dhuhr and Asr, these are times of glorification, tasbih. It's not time of salah. So you started to call them salah when God is not calling them salah. And you can also see that in the hadith where it's salat al-maktuba.
Okay.
So I have the
So
answer
for-
to I have the answer for chapter. The reason why I tell you why do you go loud or you go silent, I have the answer in the Quran, and I understand why you guys are saying those prayers, and I understand why it's part of what you guys are calling traditions, but they're not prayers. They're times of tasbih. وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ.
So for Leafy, does the Quran have authority over the hadith, or does the hadith have authority over the Quran? This is from a Christian.
Yeah, so the Quran is what is authoritative over the Hadith because it is the verbatim speech of Allah. And if you notice in my presentation, the first thing I did was go to the Quran, and I gave you the understanding of the Quranic verses that tell us to go to the Hadith, and I gave you scholarly interpretations and understanding of them, not just my own interpretation. So obviously, the Quran is the verbatim speech of Allah, and whatever contradicts the Quran, we reject it.
Okay.
So
This is another question from Muhammad. So how do you explain verses like Maryam being called the sister of Aaron in 1928 without the Prophet's explanation?
we clearly understand that as well. Very many times where God states the brothers of Lot, the brothers of Noah, the brothers of Shu'aib. Obviously, Lot came from a different place because we're seeing that Lot has migrated, and he's still being called the brothers. So here we understand that Zechariah is asking to inherit. At the time of Mary, he was asking to inherit from the family of Jacob, or an heir to inherit from the family of Jacob. And therefore, at this point, we can also understand that whatever Aaron and Moses have already done, it's been accomplished. This is also backed up by historical evidences from the Torah and the Gospel, right, or narrations from the Gospel and the Torah. And then finally, we can see that Jesus is much different than Mary is different than Moses and Aaron, because Moses and Aaron there would have not been need for somebody to inherit from the family of Jacob if Aaron and Moses was alive. So Ukhtu Harun, we can understand that from the Arabic that it does not necessitate blood.
So how do you understand? Is it lineage?
Here, no, it's just a sister in faith.
Sister in faith of Aaron. Okay.
Yes, sister of faith of Aaron. Aaron was a prophet that came before her.
Okay.
I have a question here from Ilal Ahmad. He's saying that in 5:6, which is the wudu, right? The verse is about wudu. Why do you guys go to hadith when God has outlined the wudu in the Quran?
Yeah, so I don't believe all the arkan of wudu and the nullifiers of wudu are present in the Quran. They're in the hadith. And I've already explained to you that there are verses in the Quran that tell us to go outside the Quran to understand and implement the Quran properly according to the understanding of the Prophet and the righteous predecessors. So, for example, the idea that the Quran, for example, how do I know I'm not allowed to pray in the toilet, right? There's no verse in the Quran that tells me I can't do that. It just gives me a general understanding of I should be clean. Okay, I should be clean. But cleanliness is subjective to different cultures and different peoples. For example, you go to India, they're running around in mud and they think they're clean, but we don't think they're clean. So it's a completely different culture and understanding of what cleanliness means. So you can find some Indian who's going to take this verse and say, yeah, I'm clean, I'm going to pray in mud. No, the Quran and the Sunnah go hand in hand. The Sunnah tells us that no, you can't be in mud because this by itself is najis. This is found in the Sunnah. It's not in the Quran. There's no verse that says mud is by itself najis. You're not going to find it in the Quran. So again, it's very simple, general and specific. The Sunnah supplements the Quran.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's get. So this is from Muhammad. Why don't we have any record of early Muslims completely rejecting hadith? This includes the Sahaba, Tabi'een, and Tabi'een, i.e. the Salaf.
You don't have hadith showing that these individuals as well, other than people writing it many years later, is that these people accepted legislation outside of the Quran in regards to things being halal and haram.
What about the non-Muslim sources that I gave you that are contemporary?
Wait. So Leafy, you can't add to that because it's going to be back and forth.
No
Right.
worries.
I have a question
So-
here that from Kohain, and he's saying it's on your side. You see it if you scroll a little bit up.
let me have a look.
If you think that that's appropriate, if not,
Yeah, let me have a look. Sorry.
it's
Go
like
ahead. Can't find it, but yeah, you can read it.
it says, question for Leafy: are Quran alone believers considered Muslims according to you?
No, anyone who rejects the Sunnah is a kafir, but we don't do tatbiq of that hukum until we establish the bayna over him. So someone can have udhr bil jahl, and we can explain to them and give them clear proofs for our position. And if they're like a Shafi'i did in the Risala that I read to you, he didn't takfir the person he was speaking to, who was the proto-Mu'tazili Basran. He spoke to him and he engaged with him. And when he came back and he found that he was on the incorrect path and he was rejecting hadiths that were actually useful and were actually the words of the Prophet, he was actually going against the Quran, then a Shafi'i brought him back to Ahl Sunnah. But if someone is stubborn and they want to stay upon kufr, then that person is a kafir. But this is only to be done for the scholars, not for lay people.
Okay. So Supreme Theology says, this is from Muhammad, show a verse that explicitly says Allah revealed the Quran to Muhammad. You can't use any external source, only the Quran.
Okay, he is the one who brought it down to your heart as a guidance. This is in chapter 2. This is in regards to about Gabriel bringing down the Quran to Prophet Muhammad. And there's a few verses. Let me bring them up. But he wants Muhammad by name or Muhammad as implicitly.
I'm guessing he's asking for
verbatim verses in that sense, like, hey, Allah revealed the Quran to Muhammad.
Or at least if not, at least if not verbatim, then anyone who reads it will clearly know that the Quran's in reference here and Prophet Muhammad's in reference here.
Sure. Give me a second.
And by the way, I'm just gonna ask a clarifying question for those in the audience as well, just so they can know. The question is just because you made the distinction earlier that it's legislations that is what really can't be legislated or that can't be used, right? But do you take from the Sunnah like to help interpret a verse more holistically? You don't mind using the Sunnah?
Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at what they're regarding as Sunnah, we find that in the Quran itself. So this is what God is saying, that we're guiding you to the Sunnah of the people before. It is right. Sunnah to pray. It is Sunnah to give zakat. So yes, we do accept, when he's saying that, he said that we're not Muslims because we don't accept the Sunnah. We do accept the Sunnah that's in the Quran, but we don't attribute it to one man. Now we have the verse in 47:2 where it says, as for those who believe and do good deeds and believe in what was revealed to Muhammad, which is the truth from the Lord, he will atone their bad deeds for them and improve their situation. And then you go to 28:85, right? And it says, indeed, the one who has enjoined the Quran on you will return you to a place of return. See how he forced the Quran on you. Say, my Lord is aware of who comes with the guidance and who one is clear error. And then also you have in verse 20, verse 2 to 4, it says, مَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ, we have not revealed the Quran to you in order to suffer, إِلَّا تَذْكِرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى, except as a reminder for who those fears. And just as a side note, the translation that we were using in the presentation, the one that I kept presenting, it's called The Great Quran by Shu'aib Abdullahi, or the correctional officer.
Okay, thanks for that. Is Quran alone enough for salvation? If yes, why rely on hadiths that contradict it? If no, are you implying that God's final revelation was lacking? Isn't this the same way that Christians follow Paul's words over Jesus' words?
Yeah, so Quran, of course, is enough by itself for salvation. And the Quran itself is telling us to go outside of it and use the hadith and to follow the Prophet, and that he's an example. And this is noted by the scholars that I quoted to you, like Nicholas Sinai, Wal Halaq. These are non-Muslim scholars looking at the Quran. They don't have a horse in the race. They don't care about Sunni, Shia, Quranists. They don't care about any of that. They're just looking at the text and reading it and interpreting it based on what they think it says. And they're agreeing with us that the Quran presupposes a normative practice of the Prophet and implies that we should follow it even after his death, which is mentioned in 3:145. before the verse that I quoted. And this is nothing like the way the Christians follow the words of Paul, because the words of Paul that the Christians have attributed to him, half of them are nonsense. Like of the letters that they attribute to Paul, most of them are contested, and of the ones that are authentic, there are contradictions between them anyway. So there's nothing like what we have in the Quran and the Sunnah. If there's any hadith, and I quoted the statement of Ibn Jawzi before, if there's any hadith that contradicts the Quran, I will throw it against the wall. It doesn't matter what the isnad is or anything.
Okay. Let's get the next question up. Leafy, you still there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yep. Okay. Let's get. Okay. Michael, do you? Okay, so guys, don't call him Michael. So, do you concede
No, I'm
that
okay with
you
that.
use?
Sorry, I want to preface something because they think it's supposed to be an insult, Michael from Tel Aviv or Michael, because they don't want to give me the name Muhammad, because Muhammad, I guess, is the embodiment of Islam. Man kana aduwan lillahi wa rasulihi wa malaikatihi wa Jibril wa Mikal. So Michael is a blessed name. You can call me Michael. I like being called Michael. Michael is a blessed angel from God. He's a blessed spirit from God. So I like the name Michael. Keep telling me Michael. Michael's the one who. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Michael, do you concede that you use external sources to understand the Quran, like Hajj being performed in Mecca, or do you say Hajj can be performed elsewhere?
So I can open up the atlas and find Mecca, and in the Quran it tells me that the steps of Hajj.
This is just like a question, just so I can know your personal opinion. What is your opinion on those that say that it's in Petra?
They're wrong.
Okay. Could actually no. Sorry, let me get one for Leafy. Yep, this is for Leafy. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Why did Umar say Hasbuna Kitab Allah? Even in, I think he's referring to when the Prophet ﷺ was on his deathbed. Yeah.
Yeah. So Umar saying the Quran is sufficient for us is something I agree with. But Umar, you can't just take one statement in isolation. You have to look at the whole life of Umar in totality. And I showed you sources that when Umar, first of all, Umar was the one who wanted hadith to be written down to begin with. He only changed his position towards the end of his life about the writing down of hadith because he saw the proliferation of them and he saw people being confused. So he wanted to limit that confusion. So when he says Hasbuna Kitab Allah, there's no issue with that. We believe Kitab Allah is sufficient for your guidance. Kitab Allah is telling you to go to the hadith and to obey the Prophet, and that the Prophet is uswatun hasana. So Kitab Allah is itself telling you to follow the normative practice as found in the righteous and early predecessors, which my interlocutor couldn't answer.
Okay. So could Muhammad, the hadith rejector, reference a study that disproves that the timing of ejaculation doesn't determine progeny's characteristics?
Yeah, so it's both defined by the sperm. I mean, like when it comes down to the female or male, it's defined by the sperm, and the woman's egg is not defining the looks. So that's there's many.
So but you don't have a study to show him right now.
Do you want to how DNA works and how genetics works and how people view it, and you want a specific study to show that who ejaculates first does not change. I mean, the ejaculation of a woman, the orgasm of a woman does not change the.
I think his point is more so that, is it possible in the future science could figure that out, even though that, yeah.
Then he's in the affirmative. I'm denying it because science has already proven that the woman's discharge, her orgasming, has absolutely nothing to do with reproduction.
No problem. So you're saying that every study today proves this, so therefore you have the burden, yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So let's bring the next one. Does Leafy accept the Sahih hadiths that go against the Prophet's character, like marrying Aisha radiallahu anha at 6?
Yeah, so this hadith doesn't go against Aisha's character. It just shows that you're a liberal bot. Like, it just shows that you're liberal.
The Prophet's character, he said. The Prophet's character.
Yeah, it doesn't go against the Prophet's character. It just shows that the person asking the question is a liberal bot because he's committing a presentism fallacy. Roman law, people would get married at 9. That's for the Romans who are contemporary to the Prophet. Throughout all of history, no one had an issue with minor marriages. It's only in the 20th century, after liberalism and the Industrial Revolution, they changed the age of what it means to be an adult. They redefined adulthood. And now you want to anachronistically superimpose that understanding into the time of the Prophet. So again, there's nothing here Like if the Prophet married someone way older than him, he did that with all his other wives. Why is it something that's muhal aqlan, yani something that's impossible for you to understand, that he married someone of a younger age? I don't understand.
Okay. Does he believe? I think it's referring to you. Yeah. Does he believe Rashad Khalifa was a prophet?
So the word prophet and messenger is different. There is no more prophets. Even the people who believe that Rashad Khalifa is a messenger, okay, they don't call him a prophet. There's no prophets after the blessed Prophet Muhammad. But I personally do not believe Rashad Khalifa is a messenger.
Okay. Maybe you could tell the audience a bit like who exactly that is.
Okay, so there was an individual that appeared in the 60s, like 60s, 80s, and then 70s and 80s, where he used the computer to show that these mutaqattiyat, alif lam mim, hamim, noon, and the other letters that are in the Quran, they show that there is a mathematical structure in the Quran where the number 19 is found as like divisible in many places. So for example, if you take the word Surah Qaf and you count how many times you see the letter Qaf, it's divisible by 19. Bismillah is 19 characters. According to sources, he's saying that when the revelation started, there was 19 words. He's showing that the Quran has this mathematical code, which the mathematical code does have some truth to it. That the number 19 is very prevalent in the Quran, which is very difficult to do, which shows that it's a miracle of the blessed Prophet Muhammad. But
Doesn't he reject the last two verses of Surah
Yes.
At-Tawbah?
But what he went as far as then making these exegeses and these claims that are contradictory to the Quran. And when he first did the count, where he's saying that the computer was inspired and the computer was driven by God to show the right count, the two verses there was present. It was very wrong when he was saying that there's two verses that are missing.
So for the audience, I'll just add on something here. So for the audience, in case you don't know, this guy created, like he said, a mathematical proof for the Quran that it's laced with the number 19, but then it didn't match for one of the surahs. So what he did was he said the last two verses of Surah At-Tawbah are actually interpolations. So his theory is debunked by his own standard. That is what happened.
Yeah. So we'll let Muhammad finish up, and then we'll get the next one. Go on.
So the reason why he removed the two verses is because he was trying to make the name Allah be divisible 19 in the Quran, and it was always off one count. So he kept pushing until he realized that these two verses did not align with the Quranic narrative according to him. And then he used hadith to also show that it could have been a fabrication. So he took his support from hadith, showing that the last two verses of Surah At-Tawbah was not from the same place, and he used hadith as a proof.
So hadith rejector used hadith to
Okay.
disprove
Yeah,
the Quran.
Leafy, we're gonna have to end it there.
Again,
So this is the question.
Unfortunately, you're not understanding what hadith rejection is.
Okay, so we'll get to the next one. So I think he tried to reference it with khas but failed. So he's saying that saying Allah is one is not an ambiguous verse. Oh my God, referencing to what you said before, Leafy.
Yeah, no, I never said it's an ambiguous verse. It's a fundamental verse. What I'm saying is, because the guy was asking me, does Allah know its ta'wil properly? Only Allah knows what that means in totality, right? Only Allah knows even the fundamental verses. Only Allah knows the absolute 100% understanding of what it means to be one in the purest sense. We don't know that.
Okay, so just to clarify, when you say when in chapter 3 verse 7, what you're saying is that when it says there's unclear verses, it just means that the ultimate interpretation isn't known, but you can still know some interpretation.
Yeah. So you can understand like 99% of what the verse is saying, but there will always be a part that is unknown to us that only God knows.
Okay, so let's try to get the next one.
Wait, can I share a meme or no? Like for the guy who was
yeah, that's fine.
All right, no problem. So this is for the guy who was talking about Aisha. This is you, buddy. Let me just bring it up. This is literally you. This is you right there. This is you when you first discovered that hadith. Oh, she's married at 6, consummated at 9. Oh, this is what you look like.
So next one. So this is from the brother that was asking before about can you show a verse where Allah says in the Quran that he revealed the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad? He says he didn't answer the question. None of the verses, so yeah, as he said, so he wants it verbatim. None of the verses he quoted says Muhammad. He is interpreting that was revealed to Muhammad. So he's saying that there's interpretive freedom to interpret it other than the Prophet.
Then you're obviously falling short of what's being presented. But that's fine. You want an explicit verse where it says the Quran was revealed to Muhammad explicitly. You're not going to find that in the Quran, but it's implicitly understood, and you can implicitly understand many things of the Quran.
Okay, so here's one here. So this guy's asking, I think this is for Leafy. Can you ask about, so Muhammad, maybe you can shed light on what he's asking here. So 735, 6130, and 3971. Do you know what he's
Sure.
referencing?
So 735. It's showing here. Okay, so you can share my screen. I can just pull them up. It's easier.
No problem.
Yeah, so it shows here. Sorry, let me share this tab. There it is. يا بني آدم إما يأتينكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي فمن اتقى وأصلح فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Okay, so O children of Adam, if messengers among you come to you narrating my verses to you, then whoever becomes pious and reforms, there will be no fear upon them, nor will they grieve. Other verses 6130, which states that يا معشر الجن والإنس ألم يأتيكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا قالوا شهدنا على أنفسنا وغرتهم الحياة الدنيا وشهدوا على أنفسهم أنهم كانوا كافرين. O community of jinn and humans, did messengers among you not come to you narrating to you my verses and warning you of this meeting day of yours? They will say, we testify against ourselves, but the worldly life had deluded them, and they will bear witness against themselves that they were disbelievers. SubhanAllah, these are amazing verses. 39, 71.
Allahu Akbar, takbir.
Yeah, it's the Quran. I
Allahu
swear,
Akbar.
like, bro, it's amazing to see these enacted in the world today in front of us. We see it. That's how amazing this book is.
Subhanallah.
وسيق الذين كفروا إلى جهنم زمرا حتى إذا جاءوها فتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها ألم يأتيكم رسل منكم يتلون عليكم آيات ربكم وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا قالوا بلى ولكن حقت كلمة العذاب على الكافرين. And those who disbelieve will be driven to hell in groups until they reach it. Its gates will be open and its keepers will say, did the messengers not come to you reciting the verses of your Lord in hadith? Reciting the verses of your Lord to you and
I
warning
see what
you
you
of
did there.
this your day of meeting.
You're a
They
funny
will,
guy.
Allahu Akbar. They will say indeed that the words of punishment has been imposed on the disbelievers. So 3 verses where the man has presented to you, showing you where it's ayatullah, which I think we had that discussion. So
Allahu
Okay.
Akbar.
So go on, Leafy. That's for you.
Yeah, so what's the question? He just said, can you ask about them? Like, what, do you want my understanding?
Yeah, I
of what-
don't know. That's what I was asking Muhammad. So
So
what's
he's
the
asking
point?
messengers. The messengers are reciting ayats. I think it's the same thing that the messengers are ayats. Okay, so reciting ayats, not hadith. So I think he's
Yeah.
asking a
He's
good
referencing-
question.
yeah. So I think another one that he sent as well. He was saying that, are these about the Prophet? I think that's what he was saying before. So yeah, I think it goes back to Muhammad's point on the ayat previously.
Yeah, so no problem. So the messengers of the past, Allah would send them ayat, signs, verses, and revelations for the people to be convinced that they're truly prophets and messengers. Of course, there's no issue with that. But that doesn't negate that they received another tradition that is meant to explain the previous one. There's nothing in there that negates that. So just because, it's really a non sequitur. Like, you're just saying Allah revealed X, and then you're just trying to make that seem that therefore he couldn't have revealed Y. You have to show that. Make that jump. Explain to me how that works.
Yeah. Okay. So next one. Second. So this is what Brazilian sent me. So if you truly believe, so this is for Muhammad. If you truly believe the Quran is the only source we should follow, then tell me honestly, how do you know how to worship the very God who revealed it? The Quran commands us to pray, but it never explains how to actually do it, how many times, in what way, with what words, or even what rak'ah is supposed to look like. Okay, so then if you reject hadith, then what gives salah its objective meaning? A command with no defined action is inherently meaningless. So either the meaning comes from outside the Quran, or you're implying that God issued an unintelligible command, which is a contradiction.
Well, we clearly see that the Quran is presenting you verses about the prayer, about the wudu, about when the time of the prayers are, what are the components of the prayer, and how you have to recite the book inside your prayer, and how to do the dua. God is giving you clear instructions when it comes down to application. This is society. So the way that the society is going to apply these verses can have a subjective nature based on your culture and your people. This is something that's also proven by the different madahib, where they're applying the prayer a little differently, which much of it is aligning with what the Quran is saying, but some of it does not align with what the Quran says, and it's a failure in the points of the prayer. Now, the other things where you're saying that the Quran is not giving you clear details on how to do such things, it is because you have added components to the prayers, which is not found in the Quran, and you're saying that that's part of religion. What you're arguing about is the the application that you have been given from your forefathers, assuming that that's the only way of praying. God gives you the results of the prayer, of what happens when you pray correctly, and you can measure that. So these are things that for you to actually observe and see about yourself. It stops fahsha wa munkar is the prayer. So when these individuals that pray the same style as Sunnis, but they do not do it correctly, but they're doing the actions perfectly, but they're not actually praying. And when they leave the mosque and they start to smoke cigarettes or they eat people's inheritance, it shows that it's not stopping them from fahsha and munkar. So they're doing the actions, but they're not doing the prayer.
Okay, so this is for Leafy. Where in the Quran does it specifically state to go outside of the Quran and to go to Bukhari/Muslim, etc.? Isn't that an assumption? So let's try to avoid like anachronism. Yeah, I get how you're going to say it's an anachronism, but let's try to interpret him charitably. So he's saying here, where in the Quran does it specifically state to go outside of the Quran and to go to the Sunnah? Isn't that just an assumption? How do we know that enemies of the Prophet didn't influence the chain?
I think it's safer to say to Hadith, not Sunnah. As I said, that we do believe in the Sunnah that's in the Quran.
Okay, so but the thing is, when he says, where does the Quran say to go to Muslim or Bukhari? That's an anachronism because they weren't. Yeah. So Hadith.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Dean already noted, it's anachronistic thinking. But let me grant that you're saying, where is the Quran telling us to go outside the Quran for a source of legislation? Let me put it like that. Well, it tells us very clearly in the verse that I brought up during the cross exam, which was 1644, where it tells us to go to the hikmah. And this is mentioned in the Quran. This is accepted by Shafi'i. Shafi'i argued for this in his famous Risala. And I know my opponent would disagree with me, but there's no issue. The point here is that whenever the Quran mentions the hikmah, there is a waw tafdhiliyya there, which is a conjunctive that necessitates differentiation. And that differentiation means that we have to go outside of the Quran to find something to explain it. Because Allah tells us, like I said, that there are verses that are muhkamat and there are verses that are ambiguous, right? And those with diseases in the heart will follow the ones that are ambiguous for the sake of worldly gain. These are some of the verses that tell us to go outside the Quran. Also, the ones that I cited in my presentation telling us to follow the normative practice of the Prophet and to obey him, etc., etc.
Okay, so that's for you, Muhammad. To Muhammad, where did Allah say brothers of Lot?
Sure. I think it's in chapter 50. Yeah. So it says here, okay, let me read a verse before it. This is 50:12. كذبت قبلهم قوم نوح وأصحاب الرس وثمود وعاد وفرعون وإخوان لوط.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Disbelief before them is the people of Noah and the people of Ras and Thamud and Ad and Pharaoh and the brothers of Lot.
Okay. So yes, I think that's for Leafy. So who's responsible for the preservation of hadith?
Ultimately, Allah is responsible for the preservation of hadith and the sunnah of the Prophet, just like he's responsible for the preservation of the Quran. So because Allah sent legislation outside the Quran, he's responsible for preserving that, just like he would be responsible for preserving the Quran. But that doesn't mean he can't use agents, humans, to preserve it, just like he does with the Quran. The Quran was compiled by humans and preserved by humans, even though ultimately it's in Allah's hand. It's the same thing for the hadith.
Okay, so this is from Muhammad, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, it's variant readings of one text.
Okay. Does the Quran suggest to go to sorry, I think it's for Muhammad. So 1 second. Let's go on for Leafy. I'm trying to follow.
Can I ask a question? But it's not about the debate. Okay, so would either of you or someone else be interested in a follow-up debate with a different interlocutor, a different opponent?
Are you asking me if I want to debate someone else?
Yes.
So what would the topic be?
Source of guidance is Islam. Does the Hadith explain the Quran? Does the Hadith explain the Quran? Because that's something that we often hear. Was that something that you would like? And the person that would be debating, his name is the correctional officer, Baba Shraim.
Never heard of him.
He's got a really big channel and a big influence as well on TikTok and YouTube. He's got 85,000 followers on TikTok and close to 15,000 on YouTube, and then much bigger as well on Facebook.
So what do you mean by that title?
Does the Hadith explain the Quran?
Yeah, so I think he's going to go to the tafsir and show that, like he did in his opening statement, that the tafsir is nonsense, therefore it doesn't explain the Quran. Like that's the
it's a simple request. So the topic is the source of guidance is Islam. Okay, so what's the
Mhm.
source of guidance in Islam, and does the Hadith explain the Quran? So like you can pick either one. You can say that it's
Yeah,
either the source of the guidance is Islam is the topic, or does the Hadith explain the Quran? Which one would you
yeah.
like?
So
And
I
and
mean,
it's something that would you agree?
yes, I mean, I'd have to look at the guy's channel, look at him, suss him out, see if he's even worth debating. Because if he's not worth debating, he's not someone studied or well known, or like there's no benefit in debating him. Then I'm not going to debate him for no reason. But
Sure.
Yeah,
Dean
and
can
also,
answer
and
as well.
so I think what would be good is because Leafy is more specialized in this topic than I am. I'm not going to say I know more than him.
No, you're
So
Sheikh
yeah,
al-Islam. What are you talking about?
yeah, you're right. You're my student, bro. Life called you my student, so you must be my
No,
student.
no, Sheikh al-Islam. Dean responds.
No, so I
Okay,
think what would
then
be good
Leafy,
is
in
yeah,
private, I'll send you his channel, and I'll
yeah.
let you guys talk.
I'll look into it,
Yeah,
inshallah.
yeah, inshallah. I think what would be good is if Leafy can choose a topic and if he can choose a topic, I think that would be good, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
So, let's see. So for Leafy, the knowledge of Allah is greater. This, I don't know what he's saying, to be honest. Actually, maybe. Leafy, the knowledge of Allah is greater, or Prophet Musa alayhi salam. If Allah's knowledge is greater, then how come in the hadith of Al-Mi'raj, Prophet Musa alayhi salam said, the Ummah will not be able to offer 50. So basically saying in the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ went up into the heavens, and Musa alayhi salam told the Prophet, 50 salat won't be,
Yeah,
they
he
won't be
did
able
his
to handle
shafa'a.
it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so why would Allah then legislate it to begin with if Moses himself knew that this was not a right legislation?
Yeah, I mean, Allah's wisdom, Allah knows everything that's going to happen. So Allah likes for people to come to Him and to ask Him for mercy and wisdom. Allah likes when people come to Him. Allah says, "Antum al-fuqara'u ila Allah." You are the ones in need of Allah. So Allah likes when His servants humble themselves and ask Allah for things. So this is the wisdom behind it. But if you want to ask, on the Day of Judgment, inshallah, you can go and ask Allah. Ask Allah, why did you knew Moses was the prayer was ultimately gonna come down to 5. So what are the wisdoms behind this? You can ask Him on the Day of Judgment. But that's as far as I understand the reason for it.
Okay. So it's from Muhammad. Does the Quran, you go on?
Go ahead. Sorry.
So does the Quran suggest to go to scholars? If so, which scholar of Islam holds your position that you can go to for chapter 44, verse 59 of the Quran?
It's saying to us to ask the people of the remembrance. The people of the remembrance are the people who understand what the Quran is saying, what the Torah is saying, what the gospel is saying in regards to guidance. There are individuals that are certified by quoting the Quran and showing what the Quran is saying, and those are the individuals that you have to ask. But I don't believe that the Quran is pushing you to take as a scholar or a rabbi or imam as lords. Everything that have they told you is point blank. So as God states in chapter 9, that the Jews and the Christians, they've taken their rabbis and their scholars or their monks as lords, and a lord is the one that dictates to you the truth, apparently to them, and that you can't refute them. And this is what we see with Sunnism, where they keep quoting these individuals, like these big guys, Sunnis, Bukhari, Ibn Ishaq, Imam this, Imam Kaza, Imam al-Islam, Shaykh al-Islam, these titles, and then it's like, who are you to show them when it's God's verses that are showing them that's wrong? Can I ask a question from my audience?
Yeah.
Yes, no problem.
It's similar to what the question is saying. It's a question that I was asked, and I think it's fair for you. It says, can you show us how to pray from the hadith? So if the hadith is the recorded, then you should give us the instructions.
There's I think there's a whole website dedicated to this actually that I used to have with me when I would debate hadith rejectors. So it starts with, of course, a niyyah, innamal a'malu bin niyyat. So first you have to have the correct niyyah, and then it goes step by step to explain what you have to say and do in order. But I can pull it up and find the source for it if you like.
Yeah, so just in the meantime, I'll keep going. So for Muhammad, how do you explain Quran 4:34 when it says to beat them? How does one discipline their partner according to the Quran alone? So basically, I think there's an assumption here that you can beat her harshly then.
So there's two ways of people approaching this verse in regards to admonish them, leave them from like forsake them in their beds, and then the word fadribuhunna. There's individuals that claim that it means to beat, and there's individuals that means to renounce them. So here it's not thumma thumma thumma. It's not a 3-step program where you first admonish her and then she doesn't stop, and then you forsake her in bed and then she doesn't stop, and then you beat her lightly with a miswak. I don't think that what the verse is saying. It's saying wah wah wah. So it's done at the same time. So you admonish her you admonish her, you stop having sexual intercourse with her, and you renounce her. فَنَضْرِبُ عَنْكُمُ الصَّفْحَ ذِكْرًا. So the word daraba does not necessitate means to actually beat with somebody. And then the verse right under that, it's talking about if there's shiqaq bainahum. So if there's divergence between them, then bring a person from her side and a person from their side and see if they can reconcile. And again, if you want to say that it's to beat, then there's obviously other verses on regards to لا تعتدوا, do not transgress, do not go over the limits of what God has set. Beating the crap out of somebody is never something that is permitted by the book of God. And
Okay.
again, reflected with your own exegesis.
Okay. So for this one, Leafy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So for that one, he added another super chat saying that my question was, who is the messenger mentioned in them verses? Is it the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because it says people will witness that they will witness what they did. I think he means. So Leafy, who is the messenger among us?
I'd have to reread those verses. I don't think all of them were about the Prophet Muhammad. I think some of them were about other messengers before him.
I think he's making the point that messengers are still existing.
Yeah, obviously that's not true. Messengers are not still existing.
Okay, so I think Muhammad has one of them here. So that's 3971. And those who disbelieved will be driven to hell in groups until
they reach it. Its gates will be open, and its keepers will say to them, "Did messengers not come to you? Did not come to you among you, reciting the verses of your Lord and warning you of this day of your meeting?" And they will say, "Indeed, but the word of punishment has been imposed on the disbelievers." Yeah, so there's nothing in here that says that messengers are still alive. It says they'll come. Like, did they not come to you? How does that mean?
I can bring you a verse that's clearer if you want.
Well, I mean,
that's fine. That's fine. I know it's not fair, so I'll stop.
Yeah, so I'll just add something here, Leafy, as well. So, would you grant that there's a linguistic usage that messenger could be used in two senses, or are you just saying every time in the Quran it's used, it's always in one way to refer to those who are given wahy?
No. So, for example, it could be used to mean angels. Angels carry the message of God. It doesn't necessarily have to mean like humans. If that's what you mean by two different senses, then I can grant that, no problem. But to say that there's messengers after the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, as per the understanding of hadith rejectors who like confuse the distinction between messengers and prophets. I know they think we've confused it, but we would say the same thing about them. Then obviously not. We wouldn't say there is no message after the Quran. That's it. Quran's the final message.
Okay. So you would say that this verse, just to not straw man you, this verse is referring to messengers in the sense of the prophets that came before, and the last prophet that also was among the people would be the Prophet ﷺ's message, but not necessarily him himself.
Yeah, exactly. Because the Quran says that he wouldn't punish a people until they've been sent a messenger. Until we send a messenger. Exactly.
Okay, so I'll get the next one up. Okay, so this is from, he's not really too specific, but I think, was this the verse we had up? No, we had 532. So he's asking, how do you explain Muhammad 538? So let me put that up.
By the way, how long more are we going? I feel like we've been on QA for a minute.
Yeah, so we're not. I'm
longer than the debate.
Yeah, I'm not. Yes, sorry, bro. There's so many people sending through. So we're just gonna skim through. There's only a couple left, really. You guys good for another 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll answer this, and then we go. And then Leafy is going to show us the website, the Bukhari website.
Oh, I can show it right now if you want. I have it up.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you guys can see. So, first starting with the niyyah, and then facing the qibla, saying takbir, placing the hands, open invocation.
Can you zoom in? It's just
it's a bit.
Yeah, there we go. That's cool.
Is that better? Let me start. So intention, facing qibla, saying takbir, placing the hands, opening invocation, and then in Arabic you read the Fatiha and supporting surah, etc. All of this is there. I can put the link in the description if you guys want it. Like, you guys can just search it up. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, no problem. So for 538, so what was the website name?
I'll just put the link in the description. The website was called rayanfoundation.com.
All right, beautiful. Barakallah feek. So he's asking, so we're just going to skim through these quickly, guys. So just quick responses, please. Just so we can leave, because it has been a while now.
Sure.
So no more super chats, guys. We're not taking any more past this point. So 538, how do you explain the thieves' hands being cut off?
So I'm going to share the screen if you want to put it.
Yeah.
It says here, وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيهُمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَا نَكَالًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. As for the male thief and the female thief, henceforth amputate their hands as a requital for what they acquired as exemplary punishment from God. God is almighty and wise. And then it says, فَمَنْ تَابَ مِنْ بَعْدِ ظُلْمِهِ وَأَصْلَحَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَتُوبُ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And then, and whoever repents after his wrongdoing and reforms, and indeed God will forgive him. Indeed God is forgiving and merciful. أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ, this is important, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And did you not know that to God belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth? He punishes them, whoever he wills, and forgives whomever he wills, and God is capable of all things. So we are learning from the way of God, and God is teaching us. So for example, he brings out the water down from the sky, and then he brings the seeds out of the ground for us to eat. We can mimic that. We can bring the water and do so. Now God has given us something that we need to understand, that God punishes whom he wills and he forgives whom he wills. He has set the standards of what punishment is, or who's worthy of a punishment, and he has set standards of what is worthy of forgiveness. And somebody who's in the role of actually putting the protocols of punishment in societies, leaders, presidents, and stuff, they can put the qualifications on who should be punished and who should be forgiven. So it's the exact same concept of using a ra'i, opinion, which the early onsets of the Muslims did, where God is giving you the legislation, and the way that you implement it is based on your societal needs. Now we can go as far as saying as well, and the last thing is, a sariq is someone who's habitually stealing. So it's not just a one-time case, but if you want to go with the one-time case, again, it's based upon the legislations of the people, which is not religious legislation, it's application to what God has guided.
Okay, so if you don't mind, guys, even if the question's long, trying to keep it short and succinct.
Sorry.
So Mohammed, I'm just going to get you to answer these, because these are just the rest, because I want to make sure that these guys get their questions answered,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Yeah,
Sure.
if you don't mind. So how do you reject hadiths when many of the Prophet's prophecies in them have proven 100% accurate? If hadiths are unreliable, how do you explain the accuracy of over 1,000 fulfilled prophecies? So basically, there's some supernatural origin here. How do you explain that if it's not revelation outside of the Quran?
Wait, can I add to this as well? Like, because he might say some of them are varakaram ex eventu, like they were, read back in backwards. Specifically, the ones that are after the compilation. So after the year 200 and the canon is formed, the ones after that, like the ones about interest and يتطورون في البنيان, the famous ones.
Yes. Yep. So even the ones about the bunyan and people building buildings, this is also found in the Quran, because the people before Prophet Muhammad that were strong in the land, and it's easy to understand that the Prophet Muhammad's community is going to be strong in the land because of this amazing book. Pharaoh was building buildings. The Prophet was witnessing the Romans building tall buildings. So it's very easy for him to assume this, and it's a prophetic, because it occurred, and that's what a prophet does. Now, is it necessary for guidance? No. There's also a lot of hadith that shows these prophecies that have not been fulfilled and they were incorrect, such as, for example, the hour is supposed to happen before somebody, a young kid, passes away. We get a lot of apologetics, but it's extremely clear in the hadith what's being said. These prophecies are not necessary for guidance. These prophecies are not necessary for guidance, and the guidance alone is enough in the Quran. So if there's some stuff that the Prophet said that have come truth, he's a prophet, but it's not necessary.
Okay, so he just proved inconsistency of his people. I don't know what that's referring to. And also, guys, just if you want to see our perspective on what Muhammad just said, I'm not going to give a response now to what he just said about the hadith, about the young boy. I have a video on my channel.
Same.
I have a video on my channel that you can check out. You can check his, and you can make your own judgments. Okay.
That's why this question and answer is a little too long, because that review that we're gonna do is about the question and answers. So you guys are making it.
So Muhammad, who preceded you in knowledge of following the Quran only in modern days? To which teacher does your way of interpreting the Quran go to, and who began your method?
So my teacher is God. So God, يعلم القرآن. I use the Quran to prove other verses in the Quran and to what they mean. I use the Arabic language as as a tool to understand what's being said. And there's an overall message that needs to be fulfilled in the Quran for you to understand that's what's being said. I find other people saying similar things that I'm reaching to the conclusions. These similar conclusions can come from anywhere. So it can come from Shia sources. It can come from Sunni sources. It can come from previous people that also rejected legislation outside of the Quran, such as Hassan Farhan Subhan al-Maliki. We have people al-Jahiz, and there's certain individuals as well from the Mu'tazilites that give the credence to the Quran. If the Quran is saying something and it's true, and if a Sunni is having the same exact understanding that I'm getting, which I'm getting from the Quran alone, then that's how the truth works.
Okay.
So the
Okay, thanks
rejection
for
is
that.
legislation
just ask him a
outside of the
question?
Quran.
Wait, Leafy,
Sorry.
bro. I need to get through the super chats first.
No, but it's
Let
just
me-
a quick one.
okay.
Just a yes or no. Are you a Mu'tazili in creed? Like just yes or no? I'm just curious.
No.
Okay.
So can you truly
But-
understand the Quran's meaning?
But
Yeah, go on.
but I do want to say something. I do believe that the Quran is created, and that's the one for your video
Okay.
reply. I do believe the
So-
Quran is created.
Okay. So can you truly understand the Quran's meaning without knowing Arabic or any language? If not, why accept non-preserved sources?
So the Quran can be understood in different languages because the message is translatable. When it comes down to the preciseness of exactly what God is presenting to us, and for us to deal with certain very niche debates, that's where the Arabic is very helpful. So, for example, one of the things is Kitab wal Hikmah, and then God says Ya'idakum bih. It's not Ya'idakum bihuma, and it's like وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّى وَمَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَيَتَعَدَّى حُدُودَهُ. Again, the ha here is a singular pronoun. It's not حدودهما. So we are understanding that there's things that are being brought to you in tandem, where he's saying this and this, but it's being presented as a collection, as one thing. And that's where we have to understand, or one is taking precedence over the other in regards to the limits of God, but yet God says God and his messenger. So that's where the Arabic language is extremely amazing, where it's very precise in who's the pronoun, who's being discussed, and what's being discussed. And if someone's going to come with an interpretation, the Arabic can quickly dispel that.
Okay, so this is the last one for Leafy, and then we'll end it here at 3 hours. Thank you guys for joining the live, and inshallah we can do more fruitful dialogues and debates and so on, inshallah. But yeah, this is the last one for Leafy. So as a new Muslim unsure about a Sunni madhab, can I study the 4 schools and follow all of them based on knowledge, not personal preference?
Yeah, so as a new Muslim, what I'd recommend you to do is just pick any school. All of them, like even if they have disagreements, those disagreements are within the bounds of what is acceptable for you to follow. So just pick whichever school you like or you gravitate towards. I myself, I'm a Shafi'i, and I've studied Shafi'i fiqh. But let's say you wanted to study Hanafi fiqh, there's no issue with that. You're not going to be sinful for choosing one madhab over another. Just choose which one you find easiest or makes the most sense to you. And there's barakah in all of them. But yeah, since we're ending Deen, I'm just going to plug in a few things, and Muhammad, you can do the same. So we're going to be having an after stream party on TikTok that's already live. So after the stream is over, guys, make sure to go to my TikTok, follow me, and join the live stream. You guys can ask me additional questions. And also, if you guys want to join my server, the link will be in the description. It has all my notes and sources that I use. These are just some of them that I use for the presentation, but I have way more on my server. So if you want to take my notes, ask me questions, join a community of people who also want to learn and study with me, then you can join my Patreon and gain access to my server for $8 a month. Barakallah feekum. Is there anything else you want to plug in, Muhammad?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, take your time. So in the meantime, while Muhammad's bringing that up, guys, be sure to subscribe here as well, and also the Patreon's in the link in the description as well to support the channel. And yeah, just be sure to subscribe, even if you're not obviously a Sunni. Take the opposite position. We're going to have fruitful dialogues like these and debates. Obviously, this was very respectful, cordial. So I think Muhammad would agree with that.
Oh yeah, 100%. It was fair. It was proper. I think Dean, you did a very excellent job, and I appreciate that. It's very rare to find such platforms where the discussion was healthy. I know me and Leafy might not see eye to eye, but Leafy was always respectful to me, even in our private communication, and I hope he felt the same way about me. As for me, I have a channel, Muhammad from God. It's on YouTube. I don't have a Patreon. I don't ask you for a wage for this. I also have my TikTok that you can share. This Telegram group right here, this is where there is a discussion group for people that want to come ask questions. There are individuals that are from the Quran Alone community that can help you. When I do pop in, I ask. It itself is a channel. There's another link that takes you to the discussion group. But I also want to say that one of the initiatives that we have is we were collecting money for orphans in the Middle East for a specific country. We've collected a very good amount so far. Alhamdulillah, this has been going on since May. And if anyone also wants to, I have means to make sure that the money is getting to Gaza. We've helped over 80 to 100 orphans so far, and we're gonna keep going. But this is, and whatever good you do for your Lord. That's what I would like to promote on my end.
Okay. So guys, we'll end it here. Muhammad, we'll get back to you on that potential debate in the future, host on the channel, inshallah. But yeah, guys, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Peace be upon you.
شكرا.
Yeah, so Muhammad,